That was the BBC's The Inquiry. I'm Jeff Goods here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy, Markusa, and we are live out in community this morning. You're listening to CBC's Morning Show, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. It's 3 minutes to 6, and we're on air with you till 8:37 AM. If you need us on the morning commute, 788-3093. If you want to come see us on the morning commute, you got to get to the North End. We are live at Luda's Deli. Great to be back here. Luda's is at 410 Aberdeen if you want to join us for some coffee and talk. Now, speaking of commuting, I mentioned the commute line early because our whole show today is about the Arlington Bridge. Besides touching some news of the day, we're going to really dig into this. As a structure, now that it's closed, how does it impact people's lives? And then most importantly, how do we get here? What are the politics involved? And where do we go from here in this important connection in our city that takes up such a huge landmass? So we're going to have that conversation here on CBC this morning. Let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk on location with us. Good morning, Corey. Back at 541 Portage Ave. Pat Kanuga and Abby Adeyemi, good morning to you two. And Travis Peterson, good morning to you if you're watching on our YouTube channel. Travis behind the controls. Heather Wells is also in this morning. As we've been mentioning, we have had serious news developing in the city over the last number of days, and she's here with our headlines.
Yes, good morning. Well, remembering the 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting in Winnipeg. Some 80 people gathered in a vigil last night. A family is grieving the loss of 2 women among those killed in that Langside rooming house. Crystal and Stephanie Beardy were sisters. Their aunt, Roberta Owen, says they were both mothers themselves and had happy spirits. We're going to hear more from her. Also, people in the PAW are suing their former doctor. They say she was recruited to work in their community for a decade but left. Court documents show Andrea Wilson agreed to work in the PAW until 2030 and signed a loan agreement worth $100,000 but left 16 months later. More on that story in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
World Report's coming up in a minute here. I should mention it's mainly clear -2 in Winnipeg. We're heading for a high above 0, 2 degrees. We'll have some nice sunshine early this morning. Well, speaking of doctors, in the first hour of the program, when it comes to family physicians, Manitoba had the lowest number per capita in the country in 2022. So how do you find a family doc? That's on our medical column this morning. In addition, we'll start with some history, a closer look at the colorful history of the Arlington Bridge. Right now, though, it's time for World Report at 6.
If y'all wanting. Hey y'all, this girl with stomach pains is selling meat pies.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. Danis Goulet is a Cree Métis filmmaker. She'll tell you about directing on the show Reservation Dogs and why showing love and joy is such an integral part of portraying Indigenous stories on screen.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. Thousands of delegates are on their way to Dubai for the United Nations Climate Change Conference. COP28 starts tomorrow. Leaders from member countries will debate how best to reduce carbon emissions. But policy experts and environmentalists are also expressing concern over something else: the growing presence of fossil fuel lobbyists. Ben Shingler reports.
We're prepared to be part of the solution.
Kendall Dilling is heading to Dubai for COP28. He's the head of Pathways Alliance, which represents Canadian oil sands companies.
Globally, obviously, oil and gas, fossil fuels generally are a major part of global emissions. You can't tackle this problem without tackling that.
But environmentalists and policy experts are worried about the growing presence of fossil fuel companies at COP and say they have watered down agreements in the past. More than 600 lobbyists registered last year, up 25% from the year before. Canada had one of the largest delegations from the fossil fuel sector, second only to Russia. A high number of fossil fuel lobbyists are also expected at this year's event, which is being overseen by Sultan Al Jaber, the CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company.
There is a conflict of interest there.
Andréane Brazeau is a policy analyst with the environmental group Équiterre. She says a new regulation forcing oil and gas lobbyists to identify themselves will help, but questions whether they should be allowed at all.
We often compare it to having your house on fire and inviting the pyromaniac who set it on fire in the first place to have dinner there.
A spokesperson for Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says the participation of oil and gas companies is limited at COP and part of a much larger Canadian delegation. Ben Shingler, CBC News, Montreal.
One of the COP28 goals is to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030. The Canadian government says it supports that target. So does the United States, the European Union, and the United Arab Emirates. But supporting the target does not mean individual countries are committing to triple their own renewable energy. They're simply agreeing to support the international effort. Time is ticking on the temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. International leaders are pushing for another extension. But for now, this is the last day. Aid trucks will be safe to travel through Gaza, and the last day when the focus will be on releasing more people instead of fighting the war. As Briar Stewart tells us, the peace that's holding in Gaza is not extended to the West Bank.
Throughout the night, gunfire rang out in the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. The latest clash and an escalation of violence between the Israeli military and Palestinians. A few hours earlier in East Jerusalem, Naif Salema greeted his 14-year-old son Ahmed and thanked God for the deal between Hamas and Israel. The 14-year-old had been in jail since July, under arrest for throwing stones and causing serious bodily harm. When the war started on October 7th, we lost communication with our son, said his father. Israel has received a list today of at least 10 hostages who will be released in what could be the final day of the truce if it isn't extended. The pause in fighting has brought some relief to Gaza, where the UN says 1.3 million people are living in shelters. Officials say overcrowding, along with the lack of clean water, has led to a surge in respiratory infections and diarrhea.
But there is apprehension about what the future will bring. And
Thomas White is the director of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. He says beyond the humanitarian disaster, there's great worry about the truce ending and Israel launching a ground operation in the south.
There's nowhere for people to shelter, and it's going to become very, very difficult to even provide basic humanitarian aid in that.
U.S. officials are negotiating with their counterparts from Israel and Qatar about extending the break in fighting. But Israel has vowed it will eventually press on and will go after what it sees as Hamas targets, wherever they may be. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In the House of Commons, debate begins today on the measures outlined in the fall economic statement, including the digital sales tax, or DST. It's a tax on big tech companies involved in things like e-commerce, social media, and online advertising. Parliamentary reporter Janice McGregor is here to explain why it's more controversial than you might expect. First off, Janice, when is this tax actually expected to come into effect?
Wouldn't we all like to know, Marcy? It's not unusual for a government to wait until budget legislation passes to finalize the date for a tax to kick in. But this tax in particular is going to be a huge play for the Trudeau government. It first threatened to do this several years ago, set a deadline of January 1st, but it also agreed under pressure to wait until international talks played out to see if countries could agree on a consistent way to treat digital revenues across their borders. Trouble is, months are stretching into years on that. Too many talks start to resemble stalling after a while. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland denied yesterday that not fixing a date in this bill means her deadline might be slipping.
Nothing is holding us up. We've been very clear about our intentions with Canadians. We've been very clear about our intentions with our partners around the world. And this legislation is the next step.
And it's a huge step because not only they can make a lot of revenue on this by taxing big tech companies that make more than $20 million a year in Canada. The Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated earlier this fall it could raise over $7 billion over 5 years. But it'll also move in solidarity with other G7 countries like France, the UK, that have already moved to clamp down on digital corporations that set up in low tax jurisdictions, then make millions off selling their services into other countries.
So why is it taking so long?
Well, the danger here is not only how much digital companies don't like it, and they don't, but also how much in particular the U.S. administration doesn't like it. Voices in Congress, Biden's trade representative, have all made it clear that they're prepared to defend American tech companies against unfair targeting, and they would consider retaliation against Canada if this goes ahead. And that has Canada's business community worried, because in fragile economic times, a new cross-border tariff war is not going to help.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Dutch bookstores are removing a book about the royal family from their shelves. Officially, it's because of translation error. Unofficially, there are reports the Dutch version of the book names one of the royal family members who talked about the skin color of Harry and Meghan's first baby, or as Meghan told Oprah Winfrey,
concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
The book is called Endgame. Author Omej Scobie says he knows which two royals raised the issue, but he told Dutch chat show RTL Boulevard he did not write it down.
For me, I edited and wrote the English version. There's never been a version that I've produced that has names in it.
He says laws in the United Kingdom prevent him from reporting who raised the concerns about the child's skin color. First, it was a video game, then a big hit for Hollywood, and a huge economic boost for Alberta. The blockbuster American TV show The Last of Us was filmed in the Prairie Province, according to the Motion Picture Association of Canada. Local businesses and film crews are seeing the benefits. The CBC's Tom Ross reports.
No one's going to find us.
The Last of Us generated a whopping $141 million for Alberta, making it the largest series ever filmed in Canada. It's according to a press release from the Motion Picture Association of Canada, citing data from advisory firm Oxford Economics. More than half of that money went to salaries of local cast, crew, and production personnel of the post-apocalyptic drama television series. The rest of it supported more than 1,000 Alberta businesses, including construction supplies, hotels, and catering. The show also earned 24 Emmy nominations. Damien Petty is the president of IATSE 212, which represents production crew in the province. He says they earned it.
And while you can't nominate all of the 1,400 people that worked on that project, they can take pride in contributing to those nominations, and hopefully they win some awards.
The series used Alberta as a backdrop for several locations, ranging from Boston to Colorado. And Alberta's film commissioner, Mark Ham, says the overall success is a sign this isn't a one-off.
And I think Alberta is being looked at as a destination of choice for projects of all sizes, including mega projects.
Ham says 2023 was a tougher year due to writer and actor strikes, but has high hopes for a big bounce back.
We're getting tons of phone calls, lots of interest, and I do think 2024 is going to be quite busy for the Alberta film sector.
And it may be busy for BC too. That's where Season 2 of The Last of Us is slated to be filmed. Tom Ross, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcy Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. 6:10 a.m. is the time right now. We'll head to above zero in the city today. Pat's in with that forecast in a moment. You're listening to CBC. We're live out in the community in Winnipeg's North End. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. So we're at 410 Aberdeen. We're at Luda's Deli this morning, and we're talking all about the Arlington Bridge. This hour on the show will begin with the colorful history of this bridge and how we got here. It was built in 1911, and over years and years, they've been talking about replacing it. They've patched it, and now, as you know, it is closed. So we have city councilors that will join us here later, and we'll hear lots of comments about the bridge. Already this morning, people early drinking coffee in Luda saying, replace it. 6:10 a.m. Also this hour on the show, on our medical column, we're going to talk about the need to find family doctors and how you go about doing that. Dr. Bardwaj will join us. And that's an important conversation in Manitoba. You might recall some recent stats. When it comes to family docs, Manitoba had the lowest number per capita in the country in 2022. So we'll have that interview for you this half hour. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for what's been making news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some 80 people gathered in a vigil last night for the shooting victims of the mass shooting in West Broadway on Sunday. One family grieving the loss of two sisters, Crystal and Stephanie Beardy. Both were killed on Sunday. Roberta Owen, an aunt of the women, says the women were both mothers and had happy spirits. Winnipeg police continue to guard that scene on Langside. They have yet to announce any arrests. A giant message in downtown Winnipeg urges men to break their silence on sexual violence. It's the work of the Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Center. It's a giant billboard, part of their campaign 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, right on topic there, helping women experience intimate partner violence in a different way. There's new technology, helping women who are experiencing intimate partner violence, rather. There's new technology out right now that's been developed for that purpose. So this hour, we're going to hear about that as well. So that's coming up at around 6:45. Right now, let's go to Pat Canoe. Good morning, Pat.
Oh, hi.
Luda's, it's so good to be back at this deli. I can't tell you, we did broadcasts here back in the day, and we got out more frequently at 410 Aberdeen here at Salter. And she's got it all decked out for Christmas already. Longtime owner Tracy Conapata. They've been here for more than 35 years. And yeah, we've got the sign on. They've got people will know where we are, because when you're going down Salter, you get to the corner of Aberdeen, and then you can see.
You see the neon sign.
You see the neon sign? That's right. You probably pass it every morning.
Every day.
Yeah. So it's all decked out here. The coffee is on, and if people want to come talk Arlington, they can. Arlington Bridge, hey, you and I were talking about this long history of this 100-year-old steel truss, the CPR yard sprawling beneath it. Man, we've been getting a lot of engagement online about it, hey?
It is, and it's fixed in my mind because every single Saturday when I was a kid, went from Charleswood to the North End to see both sets of grandparents, religiously every Saturday, and always took the Arlington Bridge. So it's been etched in my mind since I was like 5 years old.
I think most Manitobans at least know Arlington and at least connect to it because it's the steep bridge. That's sort of where our minds go, right? Oh yeah, that steep bridge. Because of the pitch, in fact, back in the day, if you read our colleague Darren Bernhardt's historical piece online, they had been talking about putting rail cars on the bridge, but the rail car operators, I guess, said no way, too steep.
They had rails in there. They had rails in it, and yes, and then it's like, it's too steep, and then they took the rails out a few years later.
I didn't remember that they went that far.
I've been reading a lot of history on this, and we'll hear more about that from Christian Cassidy later this hour. But
that's right, he's on at 10 to 7. All right, you're here to get into the weather forecast. We're going to crack zero today.
We are. It is a warm one out there this morning, I will say, because we are at -1 at the Forks now at 6:14 in the morning. So none of this, sometimes we have remotes when it's kind of wintry and snowy out. It's like -30 with a wind chill. But no, it is -1 right now. Today, Marcy said we're headed to a plus temperature. We are +2. So when the sun does rise at 8:01, it'll be mainly sunny early in the morning. Then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds, and not much wind today either. Right now at the airport, it's west at 18 and west 9 in the downtown. So not really much at all right now. So a straight ahead day that way with these plus temperatures. Going to be messy on the streets as well. Tonight dipping down to only a -6. Tomorrow a -3 for a daytime high. Mix of sun and clouds. Friday a -2. And into the weekend, if you're planning already, again, warmish temperatures, -2 and -3, with sunshine on Saturday and a mix of sun and clouds on Sunday. And even into next week, we're still at the minus single digits with -6s to start out Monday and Tuesday for daytime highs. Over in Brandon, -4, partly cloudy on the way to a high of +3. And Thompson, you're -14 right now. Some light snow being reported. That'll end near midday, and you'll stay at about a -14 where you are right now. So that is what's happening weather-wise. Once again, it is -1. It is a little bit greasy on the streets, Marcy, I would say, with that -1, because the streets are wet coming in this morning. So just know that it might be a smidge greasy, but for the most part, again, no real snow or slush or anything like that. But 788-3093 is the traffic line. Just to let you know, yesterday I told you about one block of Main Street between Logan and Higgins, where it was down to 2 instead of 4 lanes because of construction in there. Well, now that's 2 blocks all the way from Disraeli to Higgins. There's more barricades up there. It's a bit of a maze when you're northbound on Main Street, so know that. 788-3093 once again is the traffic line.
6:16 is the time if you're just waking up and getting into your Wednesday morning. Well, as I mentioned, our program today is going to be highly focused on the Arlington Bridge and where we go from here in our city. But we are getting into the news of the day as well where needed. And one of those places that is needed is to highlight more about what we understand and how people are absorbing the heartbreak of what happened on Langside. As you heard Heather mention, people gathered last night. The grieving process has only just begun for loved ones killed in a rooming house shooting over the weekend. Friends and family gathered around a sacred fire in the North End last night. They hugged, they wept, they sang. The vigil was hosted by Mom Away. It took place just outside of the Family Resource Center's doors. 4 lives were lost in the shooting. A 5th victim, as we've been reporting, remains in hospital. So 2 sisters from Lake St. Martin, Stephanie and Crystal Beardy, as well as Malelek Laseri Lesakel and Dylan Maxwell Lavallee. Roberta Owen is Stephanie and Crystal's aunt. CBC's Josh Crabb was at the vigil and spoke with her last night.
This is a tragedy to us all. Those are my nieces, and it's their family. They took a huge loss in their family, 2 daughters and 1. It's a big tragedy to all that are involved, not just my nieces. There was 3 other ones involved too. We have to grieve, we have to feel it. Everything still has to go on in our lives. It's just hard right now. It's very hard. It's a very huge loss. We were always teased we're alike because we're short, you know, and I'll always remember my niece in good ways. Both of them. They both had happy spirits. They were always joking around, and you wouldn't see them saddened too much. There was stuff said they were known to police. They're not, even if they are known to police, you know, it's life, right? They're not just convicts. They're not just people that got in trouble with the law. These are mothers. These were sisters. These were cousins. You know, these were aunties. They're human just like anybody else, and they didn't deserve none of this. They have children too. They're not going to be able to parent their children now. My sister is numb from it, you know. It's hard for her to move and to try and move herself forward, but she has a big family that she has to keep pushing herself forward. My sister was scared to come here, even thinking someone's going to come here and harm, you know, but we had to tell her it's not going to be. There's, I'm sure, police surveillance all around here. Somebody will come forward. I like to hope, you know, for the family, for my sister's peace of mind as well, and all the other families involved. We would like closure, you know. My sister will see her daughters. She'll clothe them and lay them to rest, get them laid to rest.
That was Roberta Owen, the aunt of the sisters Stephanie and Crystal Beardy. Now, she says the sisters will be buried side by side in a Winnipeg cemetery. Stephanie and Crystal were originally from Lake St. Martin. Some of the members of the community made the 3-hour-long journey from northern Manitoba to Winnipeg to the city to attend the vigil last night. Brad Beardy was one of them, a member of Lake St. Martin's council. He also spoke with Josh Crabb.
There's a big impact in Lake St. Martin, right? The mother, Beverly, works in our health center, and I know the ladies back home were getting things ready to do a fundraiser for the family, for the funeral cost or travel cost or whatever it is, right? And for them to get together like this, you know, they obviously care about their co-worker Beverly and what happened to the two young women, right? So they come together and then they want to do something, and then of course the council, the chief, Christopher, and the council are involved in it also, right? To really support the family.
This is such a shocking incident. I mean, this is a mass shooting, 5 people shot. How do you help a family through something like this?
I don't know, like me personally, like it's tough. I have no word inside me to tell the family, right, to give them comfort, right? But it's very difficult. Right? For me, even though it's the first time I've seen Beverly since it happened, and I went up to her, of course, I went to give her my condolences, and I went to give her a hug, and also the councilor, you know, that they came and gave her a hug, and you know that, like I said before, like Lake St. Martin, we went through a lot in Lake St. Martin for being displaced for 10 years, and I don't know if it's I think that the flood when we were flooded out. It brought us a lot closer together as a community. And we always care for one another in the community, and we will stand behind the community and what have happened this weekend.
So that is the sounds where they were singing and gathering for a vigil last night here in Winnipeg. That's CBC's Josh Crabb in conversation with Dad Drive to be there last night. Now, Assembly Manitoba Chiefs Leader Kathy Merrick was also in attendance. We have one final voice to hear this morning. Last night, she shared words of hope.
We have to remind our people that we only have one life, and that we take care of that life that was given to us. And that we have to remind our young people about that, to respect life, and to ensure that we be able to work in a good way to support each other. These young women came from a First Nation, and their leadership are working to be able to take them home and to be able to do the proper thing that we have all worked for when it comes to our missing and murdered Indigenous women in the province of Manitoba. We just want to take them home so they can be home with their families, so we can put them to rest in a good way, in our way, that we have done for hundreds of years. So today I come to support not just our Aboriginal women, but the other families as well, for such a horrific time. And that shouldn't be. We need to be able to love and to respect each other in what we do and the work that we do.
That is Kathy Merrick, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief. Last night at the vigil, we'll hear more throughout the news about how the sisters from Lake St. Martin are being remembered. Meantime, in the case, no arrests have been made. Police have also not named any suspects in the shooting. It is right now 6:24 a.m. I'm Marcy Markusa. It is -1. It's partly cloudy. We're headed for 2 degrees above zero. And we're live at Luda's Deli talking Arlington Bridge this morning. Come join us for coffee at Salter and Aberdeen. Well, next on the show, it is Wednesday morning. That means our medical column is on. And when it comes to family doctors, Manitoba had the lowest number per capita in the country in 2022, with just 111 doctors per 100,000 residents. So what do you do if you can't find a doctor? Here's a conversation that we had about it with Dr. Raj Bhardwaj.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to have someone who knows you and your kids at your baseline health, and someone who can work on the preventative measures before things just start to wear down. Your family doc can also get you into a specialist, if you need one. And there's a lot more they can do in terms of coordinating care and things like that. And as for age, I think that the focus changes depending on your age, but it's always helpful to have somebody. When you've got kids, it's important to catch, both physical and mental health issues as they grow and they develop. In your, 20s and 30s, things like birth control and pregnancy, and again, mental health, with a focus on sort of nurturing good habits to prevent or postpone health conditions as you age. And then as you get a little bit older, into your 40s, that's when diseases start to show up, things that you might not even realize, like high blood pressure or diabetes or high cholesterol, different kinds of cancer. And for the most part, those are conditions related to aging. So then as you age more into your 50s, then we start looking at screening for different kinds of cancer too, because finding those early can save your life. And then into your 60s and later, I think family docs are really important to help to maintain quality of life so that you're not suffering from chronic conditions like arthritis, pain, or heart conditions, lung conditions, all sorts of things. But preventing those things really should have started decades earlier, and then managing those things can go on for years.
Now, millions of Canadians cannot get access to a family doctor. So how should people manage if they can't find a family doc?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things that you might have to do for acute problems versus chronic health problems. So there are toll-free health advice lines that you can call. You can get advice from a nurse. Sometimes they can even connect you with a doctor. One of the best things they can do sometimes is guide you with respect to how quickly you should see a doctor. Is this something that needs to be seen within hours, days, or weeks? There are other healthcare providers that you can turn to, but they're busy and overloaded as well. So pharmacists, for example, can do a lot more than just give you advice about drugs, but they're not set up to do everything a family doc can. They can't examine you. They can't really make referrals for you. They can do one really helpful thing, which is print off a list of current and prior medications and allergies, which everybody should really know. There are nurse practitioners that are in different roles these days. A lot of times they work in hospitals. But more and more, they're starting to work primary care as well, and they do a good job. And then there are patient advocacy groups, that can help with specific issues or sort of navigating you through the system, like cancer societies and things like that.
If you go to a walk-in clinic, though, like say you're going that route and you're kind of piecing together your care, can you present there with more than one issue?
Yeah, you can. It depends on the walk-in clinic. Some of them have that big sign saying, one issue per visit. And I really dislike that because I see people coming in sometimes and they come in because of an acute problem, like their knee pain, let's say. Their knee just started hurting. And then as my hand is on the door and I'm leaving, they're like, oh, also I've had this chest pain for a month. I'm like, oh man, I can't just leave your chest pain for a month. That might be something serious. So if you're going to do something like that, I would say that there's a few things you can do to actually make your walk-in clinic visit more productive. And one, other than trying to choose the same walk-in so you do get to know each other, the other one is go in with clear and realistic expectations about what can get done within a 10-minute visit. And if you have, a couple of issues that you're trying to get covered, mention that right off the top, because it helps me to sort of manage our time together if I know what you are looking for. A couple of other things that if you are going to a walk-in, it really helps when people have done a little bit of mental prep. So, think about, well, how long have you had this issue? Is this the very first time it's ever come up? What makes it better? What makes it worse? What have you tried? What other symptoms come along with it? Because these are the clues that are going to help us to find out what's going on. And then the other thing is that during the interview at some point, the doctor usually asks you some version of, are you otherwise healthy? And that's actually, we're basically fishing for other information that might be relevant to what's going on now. So that's instead of just sort of brushing it off and saying, yeah, I'm healthy. It's just my knee, and my chest pain. That's when you say, oh yeah, I am, but I take meds for my blood pressure. Or I am, but I have inhalers for my asthma, but I rarely need to use them. That's sort of what we're fishing for, is that sort of extra information. And then, at the end of the visit, I would also ask about, what do I do if things don't go as expected? When should I come back? How should I seek further care? And where should I seek further care? And why? And what sort of, timeline should I be expecting for things to improve or start improving or, to finally resolve?
Host Dr. Raj Bhardwaj in our Wednesday morning medical column. That conversation originally airing last year, but still just as relevant today as we're talking about the need for more physicians in our system. It is right now coming up to news time at 6:30. Then we'll have our business report. And this morning we'll hear that Scotiabank, the first of the big six banks in Canada, is reporting its most recent financial results. We'll find out what those are. In addition, to mention that we are live at Luda's this morning. I'm Marcy Markusa with a team out on location. We're at 410 Aberdeen at Salter. Come join us for coffee. We're talking Arlington Bridge, used by 15,000 vehicles a day, but not right now because it's closed. So what's the future of this important north-south connection? We'll start with some of the history in the next half hour. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is a mild start to Wednesday. We're at -1 right now in Winnipeg. We start your morning with sunshine, then a few afternoon clouds, and a high today of 2. A vigil last night to support families of 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting. Some 80 people surrounded a sacred fire outside the Mama Way Centre in the North End, sharing in song and prayer 4 people were killed and 1 remains in hospital following that shooting at a rooming house on Langside. Roberta Owen was there with her sister Beverly Beardy. Beardy's daughters Crystal and Stephanie were among those killed. Owen says her sister is numb from losing her daughters. She says both of her nieces were mothers themselves and had happy spirits.
These were mothers, these were sisters, these were cousins, these were aunties. They're human just like anybody else, and they didn't deserve none of this.
Police are still guarding the scene on Langside this morning. They have yet to announce any arrests. To the Paw now, where people are suing their former doctor. They say she was recruited to work in their community for a decade, but left. CBC's Karen Pauls reports.
According to court documents, Dr. Andrea Wilson agreed to work at the Paw until 2030 after graduating from family medicine at the University of Manitoba. She signed a loan agreement worth $100,000, but she left 16 months later to work at a clinic in Vancouver. The Paw Community Development Corporation demanded repayment of the loan by December 31st, 2022, saying, quote, "The defendant has refused and or neglected and continues to refuse and or neglect to pay the loan."
Sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's absolutely devastating to him.
Cam Blight heads the Association of Manitoba Municipalities. He's not commenting on this specific case, but says recruiting and retaining family doctors is an ongoing challenge for remote and rural communities.
Not only are they out financially for some sort of incentive that's been provided, but also the fact that they've lost this, this caregiver now.
Dr. Wilson could not be reached for comment. She has until early December to file a statement of defense. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, as the city of Winnipeg ponders what to do with the now closed Arlington Bridge, city leaders are trying to avoid a repeat of what happened when the Waverley Underpass was built ahead of other major projects. The city's trying to take politics out of decisions over what gets built. Council Public Works Chair Janice Lukes says the city had no choice but to build the Waverley Underpass. In 2015, she says the federal Conservatives made money available for Waverley because they wanted to re-elect former MP Joyce Bateman.
That was the price for Bateman, and we got the money and we got them underpass. They didn't get Bateman, but I guess we got another underpass.
You can read more about the city's efforts to take the politics out of funding decisions. Just head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. A temporary truce between Israel and Hamas is supposed to end today, and diplomatic efforts are underway to try to extend it. Yifat Zayler is an Israeli woman who believes her 4 cousins are being held hostage in Gaza.
I don't know how long this pause will carry on, how long Hamas will keep releasing hostages, and whom. Hopefully it will be my family.
Israel has said the truce might continue provided Hamas frees at least 10 Israeli hostages a day. Back in this country, working students and professors say the switch to a new online HR system is wreaking havoc at the University of Ottawa. They say the move to Workday has caused an onslaught of problems, including employees being underpaid, overpaid, or not being paid at all. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A new billboard in downtown Winnipeg is asking men to answer a hard question. It's an ad created by the Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Centre. It's part of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Krista Anderson is the Social Enterprise and Innovation Manager with Clan Mothers. She hopes this campaign inspires more men to speak out against violence against women.
What if sexual violence destroyed your children, your mothers, your families? We wanted that to resonate with men too, to really stop and think about that. And then more men are needed. Where are the men speaking out on this issue?
Clan Mothers has put up similar billboards in Vancouver and Toronto. The Winnipeg billboard will be up until December 10th. Well, the Winnipeg Jets played in front of the hometown crowd last night, but I can't play any sound from Jets goals because there weren't any. The Jets were blanked by division rivals Dallas Stars 2-0. The Jets had 27 shots on goal, Winnipeg's goalie Connor Hellebuck stopping 19 shots. The Jets had 2 5-on-3 man advantages, but came up empty. Coach Rick Bowness.
In a low event, hard checking game, there wasn't a lot of room out there for either team. There wasn't a lot of offense being generated. When you get those 5-on-3s, you have to capitalize, and that certainly cost us the game.
The Jets now have lost to Dallas twice in a row. Winnipeg next hosts the Edmonton Oilers in town tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
I can't play you any sound from the game because they never scored.
I wish. I know. Hey, do I play an Ottawa goal? No.
I know. Truth. Good choice. All right, let's get into the forecast. It's time for the regional forecast for CBC Manitoba. I'm live out in the North End this morning at Luda's, Aberdeen, and Salter, talking Arlington Bridge. But Pakenouga is back at 541 Portage Ave, and it's looking like southern Manitoba's going to be a little bit melty today.
It's going to be, very melty, I would say. +3s in lots of locations, many locations, actually. I'll get to that in a second. -1 in the downtown right now. Pretty straight ahead. We expect to see some sun early this morning. A few clouds move in, and a +2, not much wind. -6 tonight, -3 tomorrow, -2 Friday. Into the weekend, a -2 and a -3 with some sunshine on the weekend as well. Over in Brandon, -4, partly cloudy. Again, +3 is the high there. Clear skies expected today, and again, not much wind. -7 tonight, tomorrow, mixed sun and cloud. -1 tomorrow. Thompson, good morning. It's a little bit chillier up in the north, -14. That's where you'll stay today with some light snow ending near noon, and not much wind either. Pretty calm day tonight. -23, a chilly one. And let's see, wind chill value about -33 overnight. Tomorrow, sunshine and -15. We have 3s in many locations, as mentioned. Pinawa, where it's -4. Verdun, where it's -4 as well. Steinbach is -5. Morden Winkler, you will see a +3. It's -1 right now. Dauphin Parkland, 1 on the way to a 2. Churchill still chilly, -19. You're going to stay there around -20 or so with a mix of sun and cloud. And Pilot Mountain, Crystal City area, we'll see a +3 also, and it's -4. Once again, in the city of Winnipeg, it is -1. Traffic. The number is 788-3093. Call me if there's anything that's slowing down your commute. Just something to mention as well. Construction continues westbound on Notre Dame around Beverly and Toronto. You lose a couple lanes there, so it's very slow going in that rush hour westbound on Notre Dame. Once again, the traffic line, 788-3093.
All right, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Well, let's get to business news now with Crystalie Ramlacan at 6:38 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Hello.
Good morning, Marcy.
So Scotiabank, the first of the big 6 in Canada to report its most recent financial results. What do they tell us?
Well, its profit went down for the fourth quarter as people are facing higher interest rates. The bank is doubling the amount of money it sets aside to potentially write off loans that are not paid back. So it's setting aside about $1.3 billion. The bank did bring in $8 billion in revenue for the quarter, but and that was more than compared to last year. But overall, it made less money because expenses increased 22%. It says it's facing higher costs for personnel, technology, performance-based and share-based compensation, taxes, and advertising. And the bank is laying off at 3% of its workforce to try to rein in costs, but that is costing it $354 million in restructuring and severances. And the bank also took a charge of $89 million to reduce its real estate footprint and plans to close some branches. For more on this, here's Barry Schwartz, who's the Chief Investment Officer with Baskin Wealth Management.
But I am concerned as we head into later 2024 and 2025 as a result of a lot of these fixed rate mortgages coming due that will have to be refinanced at higher rates unless interest rates are cut significantly. That is going to put the hurt on Canadian consumers who are over-leveraged, as well as these rising rates slow the economy. There could be job losses to be had in the future.
And Marcy, Royal Bank, TD, and CIBC will reveal their numbers on Thursday, followed by Bank of Montreal and National Bank on Friday.
Let's go to another story in business news. Panama's president is vowing to shut down a copper mine. We're talking about it because it's run by a Canadian-based company. Now, that's after the country's top court ruled against this. What more can you tell us here?
Yeah, so Vancouver-based First Quantum Minerals runs a lucrative copper mine in Panama, and the Supreme Court there has declared this contract unconstitutional. So the deal gave the company the right to mine for the next 20 years there and to possibly extend the agreement for 20 years beyond that for $375 million US per year to the Panama government. Now, the contract has sparked widespread protests across the country for several weeks. People are worried about the open pit mine and the nature and the water supply. And the company says that it has now suspended commercial production and is putting the mine into care and maintenance. Dalton Bretto is an analyst who covers mining stocks at Canaccord Genuity. He says the ruling didn't actually strike down the contract itself, but merely the process with which it was signed. He thinks the mine will eventually restart as it's the largest source of government revenue outside of the Panama Canal.
The concession contract is still in place. If tomorrow the protesters went away and First Quantum could get a coal ship into their port, they could start up the mine immediately. The issue in terms of restarting the mine is not the Supreme Court ruling. It is the fact that the protesters are blockading all supply routes.
Now, First Quantum says it wants to make the project work for all sides. The company says it is committed to regulatory compliance in all aspects of operations within the country.
What's up in the numbers today?
So in Europe, stocks opened higher as investors assess comments from the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is more confident its policies are going to bring down inflation. Germany is up, the U.K. is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are trading lower. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is up $1.08 to $77.49 U.S. per barrel. Gold is down $2.13 to $2,038.04 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.02 of a cent to 73.65 cents U.S.
All right. Thanks, Crystal Lee.
Thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Lee Ramacam with the business news this morning. She joins us every morning here on Information Radio. 6:42 a.m. Wednesday morning. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is CBC. And in Winnipeg right now, as Pat's been mentioning, it's -1, but we're going to get over 0, up to 2 today in the city. Still ahead this half hour, the history of Arlington Bridge, the colorful history, and where we should go next. A lot of you are writing in already. Ian Walker said the city should focus its limited infrastructure money on replacing the bridge instead of building the Chief Peguis extension. So he's comparing different places where money's going for infrastructure in this city. He says we cannot afford new roads. So if you want to weigh in, our show this morning is largely about Arlington, especially after 7 o'clock. We've got councillors coming down here. We've got commuters coming down. But still ahead this half hour, we're going to dip into the history to see how we got here. Of course, Arlington closed by the city last week, and it will remain closed until at least February, and where they're going to do a reassessment. But we've had a lot of reassessments over the years. So where do we go from here? Once again, not just a bridge, but a connection to the north and south part of Winnipeg that has long been debated about as a challenging connection because it really has created a divide in the city. So we'll hear more about that. Right now, though, let's turn our attention to something you might have heard in the news. There's a giant message you might see in downtown Winnipeg. It urges men to break their silence on sexual violence. The Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Center put up the billboard as part of a campaign, 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. A team of Canadian researchers has developed a new tool for women experiencing intimate partner violence. They have an app called I Heal. And the aim is to help women all across this country find ways to stay safe and take care of their health and well-being. To talk about it for a few minutes, Colleen Varco's with us. She is project co-lead and professor emeritus of nursing at the University of BC. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So how does the app work? I want to get right into practical things here. I Heal.
Right. Well, women can log on. They can create a safe, secure, private log-on on web or download it to their phone. And then they go in and they look at what matters to them and look at the resources that are available. There's a whole range of things. We've organized it into 6 different pillars where we know that women who have experienced violence or are experiencing violence have the greatest needs and priorities, and they can visit those and do interactive activities, find helpful directions, helpful resources, and it indicates they select their own province, so it takes them to resources that are within their particular area.
What did you discover when you tested this out? You had a bit of a pilot. How were women actually using the app, and how did you find it useful?
Right. Well, there's the obvious things that we had hoped for in the first place, which is that women would get a better understanding of their own experiences. Sometimes, for example, connecting health issues that they were having, like chronic pain, sleeplessness, depression, and so on, connect it to the abuse that they've experienced. They would maybe understand their own situation better. They would learn about things such as what is a protection order, or who do I go to for if I need help with housing, those kinds of really practical things. But what we hadn't really expected was the extent to which people used it, first of all, with their family and friends, often to help other people understand their experience better, and maybe to join them in supporting them more effectively. They also used it sometimes with their adult children, and also then with service providers. So they would, for example, take it to a counselor or perhaps their physician.
Just last, I know in Manitoba we've done a lot of stories about the particular challenges in rural areas if women are trying to find,
Right.
places to connect or access. How useful might this app be in that regard?
Right, that's really important, and that is one of the group of women that we had in mind when we created it, because you probably know only about 20% or maybe less of women who experience violence actually get to formal services. And as you know, there are fewer services and more access barriers and issues in rural settings. And so we've tried to make this as accessible as possible. So that's in part why it's accessible on the web. So a woman can go to a library, for example, and access it on a computer if she doesn't have cell service or doesn't have a cell phone with data and so on. And we've tried to link to resources that have the furthest reach. So if somebody is isolated, then is there, for example, a 1-800 number that they can use? So we've tried to think about that kind of accessibility. And also for women who don't have access to services, to provide some information and ideas and ways of supporting them in their own health and well-being.
Thank you very much for sharing this with us this morning. Appreciate having you on the show.
Thanks, Marcy.
That's Colleen Varco. She's project co-lead on the iHeal app, and she's professor emeritus of nursing at the UBC. The iHeal online app available for use right now on desktop and mobile devices, and pretty simple to find wherever you get your apps.
When a story makes headlines in Canada or around the world, CBC Radio goes deeper. Sign up for CBC Radio Story Alerts, delivered right to your email inbox. CBC Radio Story Alerts at cbc.ca/subscriptions.
You're listening to CBC Radio's Information Radio, the morning show on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. It is 12 minutes to 7 o'clock Wednesday morning, -1 in Winnipeg, -4 in Brandon, -14 up in Thompson, a little chilly with light snow falling. Today in Winnipeg, a high of 2, will be mainly sunny early, and if you need us on the commute, give us a call, 788-3093. Well, later this morning, we are live at Luda's right now, but later this morning we're going to talk more about the politics of the Arlington Bridge. But if the whole show is going to be about Arlington Bridge, you better start with the history. So if you want to join us for a coffee, talking Arlington Bridge, breakfast, come down to Luda's Deli. We're at Aberdeen and Salter this morning. We're here all morning with the show. But speaking to history, Arlington Bridge history goes way, way back. It was built in 1912. Since then, it's been a main connection, of course, between the north part of the city, where I'm sitting this morning, and the south side of the city. But the purpose and longevity have been questioned for decades. Christian Cassidy's here live at Luda, sitting down with us for a coffee. He's written about this many, many times in his history looking at the city. Christian has a history blog called West End Dumplings. He was part of a community panel also that looked at ways to replace the Arlington Bridge back in 2018. So he joins us now at Luda's, now that the bridge last week they announced is closed until February. Hi.
Hello, Marcy. How are you?
I'm well. I would ask you how we got here, but we don't have an hour to talk.
No, it definitely has a long and storied history, even back from its planning days. When they were planning the bridge, there were a lot of people that didn't want it. They didn't think that Arlington was the right place to have it, but the city was desperate to have a second streetcar connection between the north end and the south end. And of course, in 1905, that's how the majority of people got around. And there was a bit of desperation in the air, and there was a local city councilor called Archibald MacArthur, and he made it his work to get the Arlington Bridge built. And even though I think a lot of city councillors at the time had to hold their nose and vote for it.
So help me out here, because everybody knows that you can't talk Arlington without talking about the rail yards beneath, right? The CPR yards, which are, I was trying to do the math, I think it's like 465 hectares. So, I mean, pretty much it's the size of, if you think of a modern day development, I think probably you could argue like the Sage Creeks and such. Like it's huge, the rail yards.
It is.
People have never been down to this part of Winnipeg. So when they were initially the city looking at building it, the rail yards were there and they wanted a way to get across?
The rail yards were there. And it was the only way to cross was at Main Street by streetcar. There was a Salter Street Bridge from the late 1890s, but it was a rickety, it was long and narrow. It was for horse and cart. It wasn't, you couldn't run a streetcar over it. And wasn't practical for people to walk across it.
Got it. Now, the pitch already was an issue in the early days. You mentioned, Pat and I were chatting about this earlier, but you just said that the streetcar lines were put on the bridge, but streetcars never used the bridge.
Streetcars never. That was the saving grace that people who held their nose and voted for the Arlington Bridge was at least we'll have that second connection, streetcar connection between the two parts of the city. No streetcar ever ran over it. And you're right, it was because of those steep grades that the streetcar drivers refused to take a streetcar down it. And for a period of, it was about a decade or more, the city and the streetcar union and the privately owned streetcar company all tussled and tried to reach deals and bought different types of equipment and things like that. But it never came to be. So the bridge was, its whole reason for being built was out the window the day it opened on February the 5th, 1912.
With not a lot of fanfare in the end, right? Was it like one guy showed up?
Yeah, it was that Archibald MacArthur who had pushed for the bridge, and the bridge never had an official grand opening. It was supposed to be a bridge of lights. There was supposed to be a tender let to cover it and
make it beautiful,
Gothic.
like with lanterns.
Yeah, lanterns and things like that. And it never happened. I think partly because people were pretty browned off with the Arlington Bridge. It opened late. Couldn't use a streetcar, and then Archibald MacArthur died the first year it opened, so its biggest champion was gone.
Your quote in one of your articles on Arlington, and you've done like a 5-part series on the bridge, is a long history of promise and disappointment. So as you're outlining, really from the get-go.
That's right.
This bridge was in trouble.
From the very, very start. It was a problem, and then starting in the 1930s came the big structural repairs. You had some a little bit in the early 1930s, then in 1943, and then in 1946 the bridge had to be closed for months while they repaired structural repairs to it. And the problem was the smoke from the locomotives in the rail yard was eating the road deck away. And that repair in 1946 included putting in what they call blast shields to protect it from the smoke, and that limped it ahead for another 20 years before the next crisis.
So why wasn't that happening? Oh, okay, the smoke was happening because of the rail yard, so not eroding other bridges. Were the materials used in Arlington different from other bridges we see around town that are older bridges that fared better?
Well, this sort of plays into, and we won't have time to get into the whole Nile River thing, but
well, let's go there.
Well, it does. I think that's plausible. The Nile River.
Okay, so for listeners that don't know this, people say there's an urban legend that we actually, the people that we got this bridge from somewhere else, right?
Yes.
That this was actually a structure that we kind of like, it's almost like we bought it secondhand.
It was.
Is it true or not? The Nile Bridge that came as a bridge over the Nile?
I think it's plausible. There's no smoking gun. There's no receipt saying, that this was meant for the Nile. But if you research Cleveland Bridge and Ironworks from the UK, where they were at the time the bridge was being put out to tender, the British government was colonizing North Africa, and Cleveland Bridge and Ironworks had engineers embedded with it because they were building a railway and a series of bridges to cross the Blue Nile River in Sudan. And it was at the exact same time that the bridge was being bid on. When the tenders were put out for the bridge, the city asked for 3 different tenders, 3 different types of bridge from each bidder. Cleveland only offered one. It was a take it or leave it bridge, and it was about 20% cheaper than even local companies were able to do. So, and the fact that it was eaten away by it. People started saying right away that, it's because we bought a bridge that was meant for somewhere else on the cheap. That's why the steep grade, and that's why the railway's eating it.
So it doesn't have to be that steep because of the smoke or the rail yard or something? Like, I always thought it had to be that steep because of the rail yard.
Some of it is, but some of the length was predetermined. It was shipped that way. It was shipped that length as well. So they couldn't adjust it here because it was built in the UK.
Okay,
so I think it's plausible that it could be. And when it was first mentioned back in, I think, the 40s or the 50s were the first time anyone ever brought that up.
Yep.
It wasn't meant as a romantic thing. It wasn't, this beautiful bridge was supposed to go over the Nile. It was a tale of warning. Whenever the city tried to do something and do something on the cheap, somebody would say, don't do that, because we did that with the Arlington Bridge, and look at all the money we've had to pour into it over the years.
So take that to coffee from Christian Cassidy this morning. Maybe it's not an urban legend. Maybe this is true.
Plausible.
Plausible. Before you go this morning, and of course we're going to talk this morning about the politics, about the future, but what is your sense? I mean, you were on this community panel 5 years ago. I don't know what came of that. What do you think needs to happen moving forward in your view?
Well, I hope certainly in the short term that they'll be able to keep the bridge open as a pedestrian and cycle crossing. I mean, it would be deadly to have people crossing at track level. I hope that will be able to happen. As for the bridge itself, I'd love to see another span there, but there are just so many things against it. The cost, so many competing infrastructure projects. Out of the 15 main vehicle bridges in the city, this is like number 15 in terms of traffic numbers.
So as we're going to analyze this morning where we might go with all of our guests who join us, can I ask you this as a last brief question? Because I forgot to ask you. At one point they stopped painting it. Why was that? Well,
in 1972, the bridge was again closed for a number of months and had a major structural work done to it. And it was prior to that weight restrictions had already been brought in, but it was in the late 60s, and then even after the 1972 repair, that the trucks and buses couldn't run over the bridge. And I had heard that they were so worried about the weight issues of the bridge that even painting the bridge ceased at that time, because it doesn't seem like it, but you paint a bridge that size, you're adding a lot of extra weight to it that they were afraid that it couldn't bear.
Some of these themes are going to run right through our show this morning. Arlington Bridge, we're starting with some history. We're going to move into present day and what we do. Thank you so much for being here at Luda's.
Thank you, Marcy.
Yeah, I will personally buy you some eggs if you stick around, but we appreciate having you here.
Okay, thank you very much.
We're supporting community this morning. We're in the North End. We're at Luda's, and we are talking about the Arlington Bridge. Come join us. We're at Salter and Aberdeen. Christian Cassidy with us here live, local history blogger. You can find his writings all over at the westenddumplings.blogspot.com. And let's go to Heather Wells now for an update in headlines.
Good morning. Well, some 80 people gathered in a vigil last night, a vigil for the shooting victims of the Langside rooming house that happened last Sunday. One family in particular grieving the loss of two sisters, Crystal and Stephanie Beardy. They were both mothers, and their relatives are remembering them as happy people. So we'll hear more about that. And on the Arlington Bridge, as the city ponders what to do, leaders are trying to ensure the infrastructure projects it needs are the ones that get built. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Partly cloudy, -1. Pretty decent morning out there, actually. We're going to be 2 for a daytime high. If you need us on the commute, 788-3093 with any updates. In the next hour of the show, we are going to talk to a cyclist, someone that is a year-round cyclist that says losing the Arlington Bridge will mean a nerve-wracking commute down McPhillips. We'll hear more about that when he joins us live at Luda's. Also, we're going to hear how a longtime North End resident needs some help putting on a Christmas party for the kids. And Bartley Kivas digs into the politics of Arlington. Stay tuned.
On The Current.
We dig for the truth, and we tell it straight, we tell it honestly and without fear, and we tell stories in ways that command attention.
Martin Barron led the Washington Post through some of the most contentious times in that paper's history, from billionaire Jeff Bezos buying it to President Trump attacking it. Martin Barron coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. Time is ticking on the temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. International leaders are pushing for another extension, but for now, this is the last day aid trucks will be safe to travel through Gaza, and the last day when the focus will be on releasing more people instead of fighting the war. As Briar Stewart tells us, the peace that is holding in Gaza does not extend to the West Bank.
Throughout the night, gunfire rang out in the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. The latest clash and an escalation of violence between the Israeli military and Palestinians. A few hours earlier in East Jerusalem, Naif Salema greeted his 14-year-old son Ahmed and thanked God for the deal between Hamas and Israel. The 14-year-old had been in jail since July, under arrest for throwing stones and causing serious bodily harm. When the war started on October 7th, we lost communication with our son, said his father. Israel has received a list today of at least 10 hostages who will be released in what could be the final day of the truce if it isn't extended. The pause in fighting has brought some relief to Gaza, where the UN says 1.3 million people are living in shelters. Officials say overcrowding, along with the lack of clean water, has led to a surge in respiratory infections and diarrhea.
But there is apprehension about what the future will bring. And
Thomas White is the director of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. He says beyond the humanitarian disaster, there's great worry about the truce ending and Israel launching a ground operation in the south.
There's nowhere for people to shelter, and it's become very, very difficult to even provide basic humanitarian aid in that.
U.S. officials are negotiating with their counterparts from Israel and Qatar about extending the break in fighting. But Israel has vowed it will eventually press on and will go after what it sees as Hamas targets, wherever they may be. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Thousands of delegates are on their way to Dubai for the United Nations Climate Change Conference. COP28 starts tomorrow. Leaders from member countries will debate how best to reduce carbon emissions. But policy experts and environmentalists are also expressing concern over something else, the growing presence of fossil fuel lobbyists. Ben Schlingler reports.
We're prepared to be part of the solution.
Kendall Dilling is heading to Dubai for COP28. He's the head of Pathways Alliance, which represents Canadian oil sands companies.
Globally, obviously, oil and gas, fossil fuels generally are a major part of global emissions. You can't tackle this problem without tackling that.
But environmentalists and policy experts are worried about the growing presence of fossil fuel companies at COP and say they have watered down agreements in the past. More than 600 lobbyists registered last year, up 25% from the year before. Canada had one of the largest delegations from the fossil fuel sector, second only to Russia. A high number of fossil fuel lobbyists are also expected at this year's event, which is being overseen by Sultan Al Jaber, the CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company.
There is a conflict of interest there.
Andréane Brazeau is a policy analyst with the environmental group Équiterre. She says a new regulation forcing oil and gas lobbyists to identify themselves will help, but questions whether they should be allowed at all.
We often compare it to having your house on fire and inviting the pyromaniac who set it on fire in the first place to have dinner there.
A spokesperson for Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says the participation of oil and gas companies is limited at COP and part of a much larger Canadian delegation. Ben Schingler, CBC News, Montreal.
Ukraine's foreign minister is calling for greater alignment of Ukraine and NATO defenses. Dmytro Kuleba made the comments as he entered a NATO meeting in Brussels today. He says Europe cannot defend itself without Ukraine.
It will not be an exaggeration to say that defending Europe without Ukraine is a futile task. You cannot do it simply for one simple reason, because we currently have the strongest and the most battle-hardened army in Europe.
Kuleba says the European Union promised 1 million rounds of ammunition. He says so far it has only delivered about 300,000 shells. NATO's chief, Jens Stoltenberg, is urging allies to stay the course when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Paul Whelan's brother, says he's been attacked by another inmate in the Russian prison where he's being held. Whelan is a former U.S. Marine and he has Canadian citizenship. He is serving a 16-year prison sentence for espionage, but he denies being a spy. His brother says he was punched in the face and forced to defend himself at a sewing workshop in a penal colony. He suggested the attack may have been motivated by anti-American sentiment. Nearly 6 million Canadians don't have a family doctor, and many communities across the country are doing what they can to recruit more family physicians. But members of a rural community in Manitoba say their newly recruited doctor bailed on her contract. Now they're suing. Karen Pauls has more.
The Paw, Manitoba, population 5,600. It's more than 600 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg, and it's where Dr. Andrea Wilson agreed to work for 10 years after graduating from family medicine at the University of Manitoba.
Sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's absolutely devastating to a municipality and to a region.
Cam Blight heads the Association of Manitoba Municipalities. He's not commenting on this specific case, but says recruiting and retaining family doctors is an ongoing challenge for remote and rural communities.
Not only are they out financially for some sort of incentive that's been provided, but also the fact that they've lost this caregiver now.
According to court documents, Wilson signed a loan agreement worth $100,000 and agreed to work in the Paw until 2030. But she left 16 months later to work at a clinic in Vancouver. The Paw Community Development Corporation demanded repayment of the loan by December 31st, 2022.
Unfortunately, the repayment process can take quite a long time.
The Canadian Federation of Students says all levels of government should be doing more to recruit and retain family doctors. James Casey is a research and policy analyst.
A good incentive for them to be able to stay would be to offer them free tuition.
Dr. Wilson could not be reached for comment. She has until early December to file a statement of defense. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A new online HR system is causing major problems for students and professors at the University of Ottawa. They say the move has caused an onslaught of problems, including employees being underpaid, overpaid, or not being paid at all. Nicole Williams has the story.
It feels a lot like institutional failure.
That's Professor Audrey Giles with the Faculty of Health Sciences. She says for months, staff and working students have had to deal with the aftermath of Workday. The university paid for the cloud-based system for its payroll, scheduling, and other human resource needs. Giles says ever since its launch in May, it's been a disaster.
All of a sudden, it was impossible to see our research accounts. It was taking months to get any sort of contracts filled for people to be employed, and then also for dollars to flow.
There have been hundreds of complaints from almost every department at the University of Ottawa, with workers being underpaid, overpaid, or going weeks with no pay at all.
This has caused significant levels of mental distress.
Catherine LaRocque is president of the union that represents working students.
Not being able to pay your bills, not knowing when you're going to get paid, especially when you're paycheck to paycheck, you can't function. You can't focus on your studies.
A spokesperson with Workday says there's nothing wrong with the software itself. Another spokesperson with the university says a bulk of the issues are user-generated. It says it continues to train staff on how to properly use Workday and is working to fix the issues as fast as possible. But both Giles and LaRocque say that training fell far too short and the solutions aren't coming fast enough. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
Smooth like butter, like a criminal undercover. Don't pop like trouble, breaking into your heart like that.
BTS is one of the most popular music groups in the world, but the South Korean pop stars still have civic duties. 4 members of the K-PAC group will begin their mandatory military service next month. The group's main lead, RM, and vocalist V will enlist on December 11, followed by Jimin and Jungkook the next day. 3 of the group's other members are already going to their service. They're doing it now. BTS has sold more than 40 million albums and have been nominated for several Grammys, including for this song, Butter. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
gotcha, making you fall like that.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. We are out and about today, live in the community. I'm Marcy Markusa. You're listening to CBC Radio, and this is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. We're broadcasting live from Luda's Deli. We're in the North End this morning. We are at Aberdeen and Salter. Come for coffee. We've opened the door. I know some people were listening and came down and said, I want to talk about the Arlington Bridge, but we've now opened the door. So Kevin was one of those people. He came in, lived 6 blocks from here. He said, you know, maybe if Arlington goes and there's no more bridge there, we can improve the connection by finally using whatever money there would be to fix the bridge by putting it toward replacing the rail yards with something. So is that a possibility? We're going to look at some of the numbers, the politics behind Arlington Bridge, because Bartley Kivas is in this hour with some analysis. Also this hour on the show, and as our special show this morning is looking at the Arlington Bridge, we're going to hear from a year-round cyclist who says losing Arlington means a nerve-wracking commute down McPhillips. So he's had to do that before when Arlington's been closed periodically, and it is just not feeling like it's... well, I use the word nerve-wracking, so it feels like it's more dangerous from a cyclist's point of view. And he's not the only one. A lot of you wrote to us about that. So we're going to get that point of view from a commuter this morning who's joined us here at Luda's. Before we talk with him, let's go back to 541 Portage Ave and find out from Pat Kanuga more about the weather today and what is happening on our morning commute right after our headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, remembering the 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting in Winnipeg. Some 80 people gathered in a vigil last night, a family grieving the loss of 2 women among those killed in the Langside rooming house. We're going to hear from the relatives of Crystal and Stephanie Beardy coming up. And a giant message in downtown Winnipeg urges men to break their silence on sexual violence. It's the work of the Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Centre, and this billboard is part of their campaign, 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And now to Pat Kanuga with the commute and traffic weather details. Pat.
How's the Kubasa this morning? Have you had any?
No, it's going to be post-show. You know how it is. You do the show, you get off the air, and then you get to enjoy the kubasa. But I can smell breakfast because people are starting to come in and talk Arlington, so the griddle is hot. And we should share some opinions, actually, that are already coming in on Facebook. So once you get through weather traffic, I'll get to some of the Facebook comments here.
Very good. Well, let's look at weather. It's a pretty warm one out there, folks. -1 right now in the city of Winnipeg at the Forks, on the way to a +2. Have some cloud cover over the city of Winnipeg and over western Manitoba, Brandon as well. South of Winnipeg and east of Winnipeg, a little bit more clear. But today, here in Winnipeg, we expect to see some sun when it rises at 8:02. And then a mix of sun and cloud today with that +2. Not much wind expected either. 10 to 15 from the southwest this afternoon. That's all. Tonight, mainly cloudy. A chance of maybe some flurries overnight, according to John Sauter. He is our meteorologist here at CBC Manitoba. Tomorrow, we'll wake up to a -6. We will only get to a -3 tomorrow. And then into Friday, a -2. For your weekend, Saturday, sunny and -2. Sunday, -3. And into next week, -6s. So still no double-digit negative temperatures as far as daytime highs for the next foreseeable future. Brandon's -4, partly cloudy with a high of 3 today. And Thompson is -14, light snow. Pretty much going to stay at that -14. So lots of +3s in central and southern Manitoba today, Marcy. In traffic, 788-3093 is the traffic line to reach me. If there's anything you see out there, please let me know what's happening. There is something to mention. This is from the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center X feed. Northbound Lage approaching Dugald. So northbound Lage emoji approaching Dugald. Stall blocking the northbound median lane. Keep right to pass and expect delays. So that is happening in that part of the city. Once again, the traffic and commuter line, 788-3093.
Well, we started our show this morning in the first hour when it comes to our focus, Arlington Bridge, by looking back at the history of Arlington. And I think for me, when you read about the long and storied history, the thing that really stands out for me the most is that the first time that the city started talking about the potential for needing to replace the bridge when they had really serious issues was like decades and decades ago, like some 80 years ago, they were already having issues with this, which is just astonishing. Now the bridge is closed. We don't know what's going to happen until February when they reassess. But we have to do something for this connection. Here are a couple comments coming in. Tim and Pat Stevenson are watching on YouTube this morning. Good morning. And they wrote, with any luck, the issue will start the process of rail relocation. So that's one of the comments coming in. Vic Pereira writing in, I hope the city finds a solution sooner rather than later. Winnipeg is notorious for keeping our city divided, and he cites examples. He looks at divisions caused by other projects that didn't take off. So he cites Portage Place, Union Station, the Hudson Bay, downtown, just other things that, in his opinion, have made decisions around infrastructure that ended up blocking off streets and access to different communities. He says making Kenaston wider, in his opinion, isn't needed. He thinks Winnipeg streets are wide enough. Making them wider doesn't solve things. We need to look at what to do around here with Arlington. And finally, Tom McMahon says a new Arlington Bridge should be built with proper space for transit and bikes, and that should be the city's number one infrastructure priority. In just a moment, we're going to talk to a cyclist that uses Arlington most days. Well, that cyclist who I mentioned is sitting with me here at Luda's. His name is Chris Budlong. He makes his way to work at King Edward School on Arlington at Selkirk Avenue. Commutes from the West End, sometimes by car, but as I mentioned, more often year-round now by bike. And to say that he's not looking forward to changing his cycling route to McPhillips due to the Arlington Bridge closure is an understatement. He's at Luda's on Aberdeen to weigh in. Hello.
Good morning.
So how long have you been doing the commute by bike, out of curiosity?
I've actually always commuted it by bike. I just didn't do all wet weather biking, but spring, summer, fall. It was a way of going to one car.
Got it.
In our family.
Yeah. So you drive sometimes still, and you bike year round.
Yeah,
now.
But if I take the car, everyone's stranded at home, or they have to do transit. So, and now my kids are older, so I bike almost constantly. When COVID started, that's when I started doing year round biking, because our family wasn't willing to risk me being on transit every day with the way COVID was going around. So,
got it.
Yeah.
So that prompted the bike.
Yeah.
So you've got just sort of different perspectives on the commute. Your commute takes you from the West End over the Arlington Bridge often, right?
Yeah, every day.
Every day?
Every day.
Yeah. How long have you done that commute?
I started working at King Edward, not this school year, but last school year.
Yep.
But I've been commuting, like I said, for years. But that commutes every day. So you go over the bridge, go to work, and then you come back.
So what is it like commuting over Arlington?
Sorry.
No, yeah, go. Why don't you just take it? Because that says a lot.
Any bridge in this city is kind of a weird commute, because you have a cycling lane and then it disappears.
Okay.
And there's only a few bridges where there's actually a spot for you to cycle on. Main Street's one that comes to mind, where there's actually a dedicated cycling spot. But you go over other bridges and you're either on the road or you're on the sidewalk. So there is no space for you. And Arlington is even worse. Like, I will never ride on that roadbed. I will go on the sidewalk.
Okay, so this is going to be telling, because you say Arlington hasn't been great for you as a cyclist, although it's necessary.
It's shortest.
However, you're not looking forward to going to McPhillips as a cyclist. Why?
McPhillips is a road that doesn't have a cycling lane. Right? So now I'm on the road. And it's a 3-lane, high-traffic road where...
What's it been like for you when Arlington's been closed in the past and you've had to hike over there?
I haven't ridden McPhillips very much because I try to avoid it, right? But now that I have to, one of the things I'm noticing is that the cars are not... I don't know how to say it. Maybe not as courteous.
Okay.
And I'm trying to be diplomatic. I don't want to tick people off. But
you don't feel safe there?
Pretty much. Because last winter when I had to do it for a little while, one guy rolled down his window and told me to get off the road. And... sorry, I'm here. And he told me, go on the sidewalk. That was right after a snowfall. They hadn't plowed the sidewalks yet.
So you find a different attitude, at least from your opinion.
And even with studded tires, a 3-inch layer of snow is not as safe as that much.
So you didn't have the space on Arlington, but you found that you didn't have as many people maybe annoyed at you.
But Arlington's a weird road, right?
But
when you drive down it, everyone treats it like a 2-lane road, but it's not until you get to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
because it's actually a lane and a half. So there's room for you.
Well, and when this bridge closes, and now it's closed indefinitely,
it's closed,
what does it mean? And in the past, I should have phrased that, when it has closed, so you have experience with what it's like. How much does it add to your commute by bike, first of all?
Well, when it's closed in the past, they've left the sidewalks open. So I never had to detour.
So how much is this going to add to your commute now?
It adds a kilometer, which is about another 5 minutes or so. Like, it's not a lot of time and space, and I use it as a workout anyway, so it's not going to hurt me at all. But it's the safety thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. And I cycle everywhere in the city. So, I mean, I've cycled down Portage.
You've got good experience.
I've got good experience looking out for cars and stuff like that. But, yeah, there's an undercurrent attitude of drivers. And I'm a driver as well, so it's like, I get it. It's more like a person thing where you want what you want, and everyone get out of my way. And
what worries you about the future of Arlington Bridge now?
That it will stay there, deteriorate, finally get dismantled, and never get replaced. That's the worst case scenario in my mind. Is that route and that connection will be gone forever.
Do you have a thought on what you hope the future of the bridge will be? Will it be?
Well, you mentioned this on my drive in when you were talking about was it 2018, 2016? They did that.
Yeah, Christian Cassidy was on with History, but he was also part of a group looking at the future, and they had focus groups in 2018.
Yeah, and I remember looking at the designs, and sorry, I got distracted by my thought there. What was the question again?
No, that's okay. I was asking about what you hope the future of it'll be, because there's different options.
I hope they'll replace the bridge with one of those designs from then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you remember what design you like best? Obviously, you've already said you think it should include proper lanes for pedestrians and cyclists, but
there was one design that actually had that embedded in it. It was I believe it was a 3-lane road with the middle lane changing back and forth depending on rush hour, and then both sides had cycling and pedestrian lanes.
What if they get rid of it altogether, but they do commit? This is an astronomical amount of money. We're going to hear how much this hour, but let's say
you're talking about relocation of the rail lines.
Sure, yeah, the rail lines, yeah, and they redevelop that area, that huge area.
I don't think CN and CP would ever do it without a lot of money from the governments.
So you don't even want to talk about it. Let's talk about.
It's a neat idea, but they got to be on board, or we're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's
right?
100%. We've done lots of work on the story before. That's 100% true. I want to ask you this, though. Besides it being a bridge, we talked about the commuting aspects and the future of the bridge as a structure or not. But what's your sense of the north-south divide aspect of this? Because there are some people that feel like they are in this part of Winnipeg where we're sitting this morning in the north end, and they look around at infrastructure, and then they look around at infrastructure in other parts of the city, and they do feel like somehow, here we have this deteriorating bridge that connects the city, not getting attention, and other infrastructure projects in other parts of the city have been sort of improved or replaced.
It's easy to talk about your own backyard, where you live. My family and I have lived in the West End for 20 years now, and there have been numerous projects that we've seen that we've voiced our opinion about, written to our councillors about that, hey, we need this stuff. The Sherbrooke Pool is one example that comes to my mind. I got the name right this time because we talked the other day. I didn't get it right because they talked about closing it and before they renovated it, and we wrote in and said that's not a great idea because you're taking away something we need in our area and you're building a new facility in the south part of Winnipeg. Nothing against the south part of Winnipeg, but why would you close something that we need?
So when you think about the West End and you think about the North End and the central part of the city, does it feel like it's
and it's not based in any hard facts. It's just a feeling you get that the outside of the city gets more benefits than, or more attention, or more infrastructure dollars. Like, I don't know the exact money, what the dollar amounts are, but that's the feeling you get when you live in the central part of the city and you talk to people and they go, "Oh, you live downtown, it's so awful down there." And
just moving forward, what do you hope the city considers beyond cost as they come up with a plan for Arlington Bridge?
Besides cost, like what connects us? What is the cost? Can't be the only issue. It's really easy to rationalize by the dollar amount because it's hard fact. You can actually mally it, but it's hard to talk about community connection. It's hard to talk about those feelings that I mentioned. And I think those are just as important, to know that this part of the city is valued, and we're going to look after it. And I in this area, when I first start working at King Edward, I took my bike and I rode around this area and just took a look at what's the community I'm going to be involved in, right? There's lots of places down here that need attention.
Thank you very much for weighing in this morning, Chris. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Chris Budlong is a daily commuter who had been using the Arlington Bridge. And as you've been hearing, he does work at a school. He commutes from the West End to the North End every day. He works at King Edward School right on Arlington. So last week, the city shut the bridge down till at least February, where it will be reassessed. So the numbers, we've been talking about the community connections, the history, how people feel in this area, what people are thinking about the bridge. But what are the numbers and what are the politics about how we got here? Bartley Kivas is in with a special report coming up at 10 to 8 this morning, so stay tuned. We'll have that. Right now, I'm just going to have a look at what's going on in the weather forecast. Our high today, 2 degrees, mainly sunny this morning, and then a mix of sun and clouds. And in a moment, we're going to get into a bit of a traffic issue that we have.
It's a wonderful time of year, a season worth celebrating, a season of giving, a season for kindness. Let's make the season kind for those in need. December 1st, CBC is devoting a day of programming in support of Harvest Manitoba. Music, stories, and giving. Make the season kind. Visit cbc.ca/BeKindMB for details.
We got a call on our traffic line. I was alluding to this. Michael called from Brandon. So streets are greasy inside and outside Brandon this morning. Take it easy if you're driving. Note that. And if you're walking or biking as well. 788-3093. So let's get started with the Winnipeg Jets last night. We'll turn our attention to morning sports here at 7:26 a.m. Scott Regere's here. Hello.
Hey there, Marcy.
Heather was saying on the news this morning we can't play sounds of a goal because, well, no one scored.
No, but there are other highlights from what ended up a 2-0 loss to the Dallas Stars. Highlights from, among other places, from Pat's house. He's a very patient guy usually with his team, but let's have a listen.
Shoot the puck!
That was during...
Wow. Thanks, Pat.
Live from Pat's basement. But, I mean, I understand his angst because on 2 occasions last night, and remember, they didn't score against Dallas, the Jets had 2-man advantages. You are meant to put the puck on the net under such circumstances. So Pat wasn't the only one frustrated. Rick Bowness, the head coach, who was back behind the bench in his home rink for the first time since returning to the team, he had his issues with a failure to score as well.
Story of the night. You know, it's rare to get one, to get 2 like we did. In a low event, hard checking game, there wasn't a lot of room out there for either team. There wasn't a lot of offense being generated. When you get those 5-on-3s, you have to capitalize, and that certainly cost us the game.
There you are. That's Rick Bowness, who, by the way, got a nice ovation from the fans at the arena. Obviously, his wife has had medical issues, and they let him know that they were behind him with the ovation he got last night.
Nice, classy. Thank you, Jet fans. Winnipeg Blue Bombers, let's go there. They have a little more clarity heading into the CFL offseason now.
They do. The team announced yesterday, Marcy, that general manager Kyle Walters has signed a new 2-year contract extension. He, along with general managers Danny McManus and Ted Goivea, assistant GMs, will be back. There was some uncertainty, given the CFL's football operations salary cap, whether the Bombers would be able to afford to keep Walters, let alone his assistants. It remains to be seen whether the 3 took discounts to remain part of the glory years of this franchise, but the focus now can move to more conventional off-season endeavors, such as the draft and re-signing key free agents. Winnipeg has 36 of those, headlined by running back Brady Oliveira and wide receiver Dalton Schoen. But given their relationship with Walters over the years, that will only be impetus, you would think, to possibly re-sign with the green. Or rather, did I say green? Blue and gold is what I meant to say, of course.
Before you go a little more hockey here, a future Hall of Famer is part of yet another controversy in Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. Corey Perry's been released by that city's NHL team, Marcy, this after he was deemed to have engaged in unacceptable conduct by the club. Rumors have spread across social media this week, many of them suggesting Perry had an inappropriate relationship with a teammate's family member. But Kyle Davidson, the general manager of Chicago, dispelled that with vigor, said that even the suggestion of that happening was, in his view, quote-unquote, disgusting. So Corey Perry out as a member of Chicago, where he ends up next. The future Hall of Famer, we'll soon see.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott.
You betcha.
Scott Regier with Morning Sports, with a little help from Pat yelling at his TV last night. Representative of the fans, though, right? Shoot! Come on, Jets. Coming up from our live show at Ludus here in Winnipeg's North End, we're going to switch gears. We've been talking about the Arlington Bridge. Right now, we're going to talk about a need in this area. A longtime resident of this area is getting ready to bring holiday magic to community, but there's a big need for gifts and help and donations to make the North End Christmas party happen for the kids. So we're going to hear more about it after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. It is mild this morning. It's -1 right now. Our high today will be 2. We start the day with sunshine, a few clouds moving in this afternoon. Remembering the 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting in Winnipeg. Some 80 people gathered at a vigil last night. A family grieving the loss of 2 sisters among those killed in that Langside rooming house. Crystal and Stephanie Beardy were both in the rooming house at the time of the shooting. Roberta Owen, their aunt, was there at the vigil with their mother and band counselors from the family's home community of Lake St. Martin First Nation. Owen says her niece's deaths have had a huge impact on the family, and the support, she says, from the community means a lot.
It helps a lot. It's not going to take any pain away, we have to grieve, we have to feel it. Everything still has to go on in our lives. It's just hard right now. It's very hard. It's a very huge loss.
Malelek Lesikal, who has family in the U.S. and Kenya, and Dylan Lavalley of Winnipeg also died. A 5th person remains in hospital. Winnipeg police have yet to announce any arrests. To the paw now, where people are suing their former doctor. They say she was recruited to work in their community for a decade, but left. CBC's Karen Pauls has the story.
According to court documents, Dr. Andrea Wilson agreed to work at the PAW until 2030 after graduating from family medicine at the University of Manitoba. She signed a loan agreement worth $100,000, but she left 16 months later to work at a clinic in Vancouver. The PAW Community Development Corporation demanded repayment of the loan by December 31st, 2022, saying, quote, "The defendant has refused and or neglected and continues to refuse and or neglect to pay the loan."
Sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's absolutely devastating to him.
Cam Blight heads the Association of Manitoba Municipalities. He's not commenting on this specific case, but says recruiting and retaining family doctors is an ongoing challenge for remote and rural communities.
Not only are they out financially for some sort of incentive that's been provided, but also the fact that they've lost this, this caregiver now.
Dr. Wilson could not be reached for comment. She has until early December to file a statement of defense. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
As the city of Winnipeg ponders what to do with the now closed Arlington Bridge, city leaders are trying to ensure the infrastructure projects it needs are the ones that get built. Council Public Works Chair Janice Lukes says she and her council colleagues are trying to work with MLAs and MPs to ensure politics doesn't influence funding decisions.
We can't do any major project without provincial or federal support. It's virtually impossible.
You can read more about the city's efforts to take politics out of funding decisions on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba. The temporary truce between Israel and Hamas is supposed to end today, but there are diplomatic efforts underway to try to extend it. Yifat Zayler is an Israeli woman who believes her 4 cousins are being held hostage in Gaza.
I don't know how long this pause will carry on, how long Hamas will keep releasing hostages. And whom? Hopefully it will be my family.
Israel has said the truce might continue provided Hamas frees at least 10 Israeli hostages a day. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 8. A giant message in downtown Winnipeg urges men to break their silence on sexual violence. The billboard is the work of Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Centre. It's part of their campaign, 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Krista Anderson was involved in this project.
A lot of men do have a hard time kind of talking about that. I know I asked my own son what he thought if something happened to his daughter, whatnot, and he had replied, I don't even want to talk about that.
Clan Mothers has put up similar billboards in Vancouver and Toronto. The Winnipeg sign will be up until December 10th. For the first time this season, the Winnipeg Jets were shut out last night. Winnipeg couldn't score a single goal in front of the hometown crowd. 2-0 the final for the Dallas Stars. Jets head coach Rick Bowness says his team failed to capitalize on 2 5-on-3 man advantages.
When you're playing those teams, you have to score to make them change the way they're playing, and we didn't score.
This is the second time division rivals Dallas have beaten the Jets in as many games. Next up, Winnipeg hosts the Edmonton Oilers tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much, Heather Walls. It is 7:35 a.m. We got a busy Wednesday morning on our hands at Luda's here, which is great. The tables are getting packed. If you've never been to Luda's, we're live on location in the North End. We're at Aberdeen and Salter, and it's just a lovely spot. There's probably about maybe about 10 to 12 tables. There's a bar counter here as well to sit up and pull up to. It's surrounded by Christmas this morning because the owner, Tracy Conopata, who's been here for some 35 plus years. Good morning. She's yelling from the grill. We've got all kinds of decorations already around us, so it's really festive and beautiful. There's some regulars here. You guys want to have your moment?
Good morning from Luda's.
There we go. We're cueing them to say good morning to Manitoba. Thank you, guys. Coffee's on. Smells like sauerkraut, which smells like my mom's house. So somebody must be having a Reuben around here for breakfast. But come and join us if you want. We're talking the Arlington Bridge. That's why we're on location here at Luda's this morning. And so we'll have more to come in this half hour. Pat Canuga, we should dip into weather and traffic here. What do we know about that on this Wednesday morning?
Well, let's just start off with traffic. Just to mention that, as you mentioned about 10 minutes ago, Michael called us from Brandon. Streets are greasy inside and outside of Brandon with the temperature changes that it was about plus 4 or 5 yesterday, Michael said. And then dipping down the overnight, right now it is -4. So some of the moisture in the air, it's a little bit greasy, so know that is happening. Also, northbound Maine between Disraeli and Higgins. There are 2 blocks of construction now. It's a bit of a maze to get through there. You lose a couple of lanes. Yesterday it was just between Logan and Higgins, but now it is from Disraeli to Higgins, so know that will slow you down. And if you are on Notre Dame, construction continues westbound between around that Beverly-Toronto area. You lose a lane or 2 in there as well, so it gets to be a bit of a squeeze play with equipment, and there's a big pile of sand as I drove by it yesterday, so know that is happening. The traffic line is 788-3093. Let me know if there's any issues out there. I'm standing by. In weather, it's a mild one. We're -1 in the downtown right now. Today, will be mainly sunny early in the morning. Some clouds move in a little bit later. I'm looking at satellite imagery. Some cloud cover over the city right now and over in the Brandon area as well and north of the city. But we expect to see some sunshine and a mix of sun and clouds today with that +2. Not much wind expected. Southwest 10 to 15 this afternoon. Overnight, -6. That's what we'll wake up to. Tomorrow, a -3. So we're on the minus temps for the next few days. And then on Friday, a -2. Mix of sun and cloud both those days. And Saturday, Sunday, mainly sunny, a -2 again, a -3. And into next week, a pair of -6s to start your week Monday, Tuesday. Those are the daytime highs for the city of Winnipeg. Brandon, -4 right now, partly cloudy on the way to a +3. Clear and not much wind expected once these clouds move out. Tonight, down to -7. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, and -1. And up in Thompson, a little bit cooler up there, -14 Thompson. That's where you're going to stay today. Some light snow flurries that you're seeing right now are going to be ending by about noon. Then the clouds are going to stick around with that -14. Tonight, the temperature drops to a -23 with a risk of frostbite because a wind chill of -33 overnight. But tomorrow, sunny and rebounding to a -15. We have a lot of +3s today, Marcy, in the forecast for places such as Morden and Winkler, Steinbach, Verdon, Pinawa, all +3s. We're hanging out just -5 in Steinbach right now, -4 in Verdon, Morden, Winkler, -1. Pilot Mound's -4, +3 there as well. And Dauphin Parkland, you're at a 1. You'll get to a 2. So a pretty mild day. Once again, on the streets could be a little greasy here in the city of Winnipeg, too. They look a little bit bit wet on Portage Avenue outside our Studio 15 here, but it's -1, Mars.
So, Pat, I want you to guess. Now, I know you've done some research for about Arlington Bridge since it got closed last week from the city, and we've been doing stories. But I don't think you know this stat. I didn't know it. When do you think the first time the city started talking about moving the rail yards?
Well, started talking about the rail yards. I'm going to say early...
the rail yards specifically.
I think early 70s.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
1872.
What? They just put them in.
Yeah, that's... Christian Cassidy said they were already talking about it in 1872. Now, he's a historical blogger. He was on with us. He's done a 5-part series on Arlington. 1972 is the year that they actually had a commitment from the federal government for 50% of the cost at that time. But the city didn't go for it at that time.
1872, it was one line.
They were already talking about it, apparently. That is right from Christian Cassidy's mouth. He's here at Luda's. You can be too. We're talking Arlington Bridge. Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
Come and join us. So Luda's is at Aberdeen and Salter. I want to read a couple quick comments that have been coming in. We have Tom McMahon writing in, a new Arlington Bridge with proper space for transit and bikes should be the city's #1 infrastructure priority. Karen J. Taylor saying, new bridge, please. It's been dangerous for years, but to expand to McPhillips or Salter and have nothing between is a bad idea. I live just north of the Arlington Bridge. There's so many kinds of traffic. People use it of all ages, and in my opinion, rather it's implied, she goes on to share her opinion. She writes, not having a bridge would make vital services much harder to get to for lots of area residents. And finally, Vib Ketchum says, will it affect the response time for emergency personnel that are trying to get across the city? So how much is it used for emergency personnel? We're going to hear from Councilor Santos and Councilor Eadie, who's already here actually at Luda's getting ready to talk to us. They're on air after 8 o'clock to look at where we can go from here and some of the possibilities. That bridge, 15,000 vehicles go across it each day. Of course, a vital connection for North and South Winnipeg, and closed right now. They'll reassess it in February. Next on the show, let's talk about something different, but that is still very rooted in where we are this morning, because we're live in the North End. Kyle Mason is sitting here at Luda's with us. He's proud to call this area home. He's lived here most of his life, and you might know that for 15 years Kyle has been hosting the North End Christmas Party. It's an event where families share in a holiday meal and festive activities, and it includes toys for the kids. But this year Kyle says there's some help that is needed. So good morning, Kyle. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to introduce who you've brought?
I brought my son Elijah with me.
Hi, Elijah. How are you?
Good.
I remember talking to you when you raised money and you actually donated it to help out kids with presents at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you do that? Like, why do you think it's important that kids get gifts at Christmas?
I don't know.
Obviously, you get a generous spirit from your dad, though. Yeah. What's the trouble this year? Tell me what's going on.
Well, not so much trouble yet, hopefully to avoid trouble, but we are in the middle where we have launched the toy collection part of this campaign, because the party is December the 19th, and we're looking to collect about 600 brand new unwrapped toys of about a $20 value for all ages and all genders. And so we're asking people to either drop off toys at any Birchwood Automotive dealership within the city, Modern Coffee at the corner of Inkster and Main, Olympia Cycle and Ski on Portage, or Folio Cafe on Grant Avenue. It's at the CMU campus, and there's a few other places there as well. Oh yeah, Remax on Pembina. There's just so many people that want to get involved. I might even forget a couple other places, but you could drop them off at any of those locations between now and December the 16th.
How do families enjoy this party every year? Tell us a bit about the annual party and what it means to families that you talk to.
It's always a lot of fun, because times. Okay, so if you're under-resourced, times are always tough. But with COVID and now rising costs of absolutely everything, it's like an extra 1-2 punch for families, and it can be really, really difficult for families to make sure Christmas happens for their kids. And like every parent out there, no matter who you are or where you are, you want to have a magical holiday season for your kids. But sometimes, for some families, toys is just a luxury that can't happen. So we want to make sure that people have a toy under the tree, and we also want to make sure they have a nice party. So there's, of course, a turkey meal. There's Christmas carols being sung. Santa, the real Santa's coming down for pictures with families, because that's another expense. It's very expensive.
So Santa's already committed, if you're listening.
Oh, yes.
Kyle's got Santa on board.
Yeah, Santa's coming down. And like I said, we're going to have a professional photographer take pictures, family pictures with Santa. And of course, at the end of the night, every parent or caregiver gets to go through our toy room, which is set up like a toy store, and pick out a toy for each of their kids.
Oh, I love that. You said that you go for 600 toys, but a $20 value a piece. Are there specific ages, if someone's listening and they can make a donation, they should be thinking about?
I would say probably the most highly needed are between the ages of 5 to 10.
Okay.
But we have requests for newborns and teenagers as well.
How old are you, Elijah?
10.
Yeah? What do you want for Christmas this year? What are you asking Santa for? Or Dad?
Realistically, like a video game.
A video game? Yeah, cool. That's a good gift. That's a good gift. I love that you're collecting for kids. What does it mean to you? Why don't you take us back to why you started, being involved in this party, Kyle?
Well, this party started off as the Christmas party for an organization that I used to run called the North End Family Center. But it also goes back to my youth when I was my son's age and younger. I grew up here in the North End in a single-parent family. And my mother tried and did accomplish to make the holiday special and magical. But there were a lot of lean years for my family. My mother went back to school and was working, but sometimes it was a very humble holiday season. And I remember times going back to school after Christmas, having a good Christmas experience, but having a very small list of toys in comparison to some of my friends. And that never felt nice as a kid. And so we want to make sure that at least there's one toy under the tree for all these kids, and this year we're looking to serve about 500 meals and hand out about 600 or 700 toys.
Who do you want to thank in community for making this happen? Because obviously there's teams of people that must work with you and volunteer their time to help out and make this happen.
Yeah, I'm just the face of this, good or bad, but there's a lot of people to thank. I have a small group of committee members: Tim Enns, Colleen Epp, Natalie Smith, and her partner, and also, St. John's Cathedral has been our venue every year.
And it is this year as well?
It is
St. John's Cathedral, okay.
They always donate their space. They also provide a small army of volunteers.
Amazing.
All those collecting points that I said earlier, Olympia Cycles and Ski, NCI Radio, Remax on Pembina, CMU, but especially Birchwood. Birchwood has been an amazing partner for years. They have been collecting toys at all their dealerships for years, but additionally, they always are our main sponsor when it comes to covering the expenses, which is primarily the meal.
Amazing.
So this year they're donating $7,500 towards the party, which covers the lion's share of our need, but we still have a little bit more. And so there's just a lot of people involved.
So it's at St. John's Cathedral.
Correct.
You said. And then what's the date once again to reiterate?
December the 19th. Yesterday we got all filled up on our registration. So now that's why I'm here, is we're kicking into the collecting of toys and any monetary gifts people might want to send in as well. NorthEndChristmas.org is what I have if people want to remind themselves. Is that right? This year we're asking for e-transfers, and the e-transfers can go to northendchristmas@gmail.com.
Okay, I'm writing it down. northendchristmas@gmail.com. For more information, I guess, questions, and of course for transfers if you can help out. Thank you very much for coming in. Nice to see you early in the holiday season. I hope you have a merry one.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, and thank you for coming in. I hope Santa brings you some video games. Okay, which one in particular, in case he's listening? Whisper it.
The new Super Mario game?
Okay, Santa, the new Super Mario game for Elijah. Nice to see you. Yeah, you guys take care. We are live at Luda's in the North End this morning talking about the North End Christmas Party. December 19th, Kyle Mason has been here with his son Elijah. For more information about how you can help, they're looking for donations of toys. Toys is what they are looking for. northendchristmas@gmail.com.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you.
Lift off.
Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
It is 12 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. Thanks for joining us here on CBC's Information Radio. We are live out in Community this morning, and it's a nice morning to come on down and join us at Luda's if you want to. We're Luda's Deli in the North End, Aberdeen, and Salter. Nice temperature-wise is what I'm meaning. It's right around -1 right now. We're going to be 2 degrees above zero, mainly sunny. We have had some calls, though. Northbound Lagimodiere approaching Dugald. There was a stall there. It's now clear. All lanes open for traffic. We got some calls from Brandon, though, to talk about the fact that it is greasy, both inside and outside Brandon. If you're walking, driving, commuting, it is greasy on the streets there. So 788-3093 is where you can reach us to talk more, tell us more rather about the commute, and we'll pass it along. Well, the reason we're live in the North End at Luda's today is because we're talking about the Arlington Bridge now that it is closed, and we actually have councillors that are going to be joining us after 8 o'clock on the program. Councillors Edie and Santos will be responding to where we go from here. But to look a little bit more at the politics of how we might have got here, and also the costs involved in this whole discussion about the rail yards, about the bridge, we have Bartley Kivas, who's popped down to Luda's with us. As we've been telling you, Arlington Bridge closed last week. The city, though, has known for decades that this could happen. We got to close it now. And so here we are. CBC's Bartley Kivas has followed City Hall since the first term of Sam Cates' time in the mayor's office. So he knows this story, and he joins us at Luda's. Thanks for being here. Good morning.
Good morning. It is an honor to be here in the North End right now.
I won't promise to buy you breakfast, but I promise to eat with you later.
No eating.
Eating for me. Let's talk all about Arlington here, Bartley. How long has the city known that Arlington Bridge was coming to the end of its lifespan?
66 years, Marcy. Now, well, no, let's make that, 56. I can't add in my head. 1967, first warning it needed to be replaced. So the city's made sporadic repairs ever since. A little bit 1 year, a little bit another year, over and over and over, trying to extend the lifespan. Then in 2011, there's a study. Okay, what do we do with this thing? It's going to be coming to the end of its lifespan. That turns in 2018 to an actual plan, a good estimate, what the city calls a Class 3 estimate. That's more accurate than a Class 5 estimate. We're not going to make people fall asleep driving to work in the morning getting into what those estimates mean, but it comes up with a $320 million plan to build a new bridge with a more gentle slope that you can actually put buses on, and cyclists and fire trucks, and is actually, works as a vehicle bridge. In 2023, city determines we don't have any money for that plan. Let's do another study. That first part of that study came out, and now it's closed.
So why was it not just built? Given that they've studied it, they actually had that concrete plan. Why wasn't it just built?
Okay, well, the city has limited capital. Capital meaning money to spend on big projects. And if you go back to the 2000s and the 2010s, there was a lot of money spent on capital in that time frame. The Cates administration, early into the Bowman administration, Chief Pegwas Trail was extended. McGillivray Road was widened. The Waverly West roads were built. Southwest Transitway was built. There was a Pembina underpass at Jubilee. There was a Waverly underpass. Anyway, we're talking about $1 billion there when you all add all that up. And now the city doesn't have any borrowing room, and there's less money available from other levels of government.
So obviously, you mentioned a lot of projects, and we're not here to debate whether or not those projects were necessary or not.
Why not?
Well, but I mean, it's not about pitting areas against each other, but it's hard not to notice that all that money is mainly spent in Southwest Winnipeg.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do have to notice that. I mean, then that wasn't lost on Councilor Janice Lukes. She was the City Council's Public Works Chair when the Waverly Underpass was floated.
I was the chair of Public Works at the time. See, I laid the report over. I wasn't crazy about funding it because we were building a $600 million rapid transit corridor. But then the feds come along, for whatever reason, they decide that's their priority. So then you have the city sitting here, always scrounging for money because of the current funding model that we have with the province and the feds. Then we're sitting here, we're like, okay, city, here's, on a silver platter, I don't know, I forget what it was, here's $20 million. Well, what do? Right? It's like a drug. So you go, well, we might have to realign our priorities. And we realign our priorities, and we built the thing. We built the Waverly Underpass.
So what happened there was electoral politics was at play. You have in 2015, you have Stephen Harper's Conservative government. They have Joyce Bateman in Winnipeg South Centre, the Conservative MP. They want Bateman to be re-elected. Everyone in Southwest Winnipeg wants a Waverley underpass. They don't care that they got Waverley West roads built. They're like, I don't live there yet. Nobody was living there basically when those roads were getting built. They don't really care about the Southwest Transitway. A lot of those people drive. So Waverley underpass, politically popular, and the feds made the money available. The province went along with that. That was a Selinger government at the time, and it got built. But Joyce Bateman didn't win anyway.
So where did that project rank at the time?
Well, the city had a transportation master plan in 2011, and that project was a medium-term priority, same as the Arlington Bridge. There was a list of priorities that were higher priorities, but that one was not right now, and it kind of got bumped up. Now, City Council had a matrix that said, actually, this is a top priority, but that was just sort of more of a political exercise. Now, in 2020, the city came up with a new list of priorities. They had 45 of them. They ranked them. The Louise Bridge, which is even older than the Arlington Bridge, its piles date back to 1885. It was not built. It was ranked number 26.
Okay.
And the Arlington Bridge was ranked number 31. And Janice Luke says she never liked that list because it was never allowed any feedback. Now, there's a new list when this transportation master plan that's been studied for a while comes out. This new transportation master plan comes out early next year. And the city basically comes up with actually has a sort of a systematic, if not scientific, way of coming up with these lists. First, they determine, okay, what do we have to do regulatory-wise, like Water Pollution Control Center upgrades to make sure that we're meeting our sewage treatment standards. Then there's maintenance, and then there's also funding. Jeff Patton is the Director of Assets and Project Management with the City of Winnipeg.
We're trying to make objective and reasoned recommendations for council, but certainly council needs to put that lens in terms of other factors that they want to consider as part of the infrastructure plan and what budget they'll support.
So what happens next, Bartley? I mean, obviously you're talking about priorities and lists and rankings, but at the end of the day, what happens next?
Well, Luke says the city councillors and the mayor, they have to build and improve the relationships with MLAs and MPs that make these decisions, and stress to them the city has its own priorities. And, they've had some success so far with the sewage treatment funding, which isn't very sexy. People don't really care that much. They don't think about it, but this is the upgrades at the Water Pollution Control Centers are billions. They're the most expensive thing the city's doing. But anyway, this success so far, it's not going to build you an Arlington Bridge.
All right, Bartley. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here to update us on this. Obviously, you're going to set us up for a conversation that we're going to have after 8 o'clock, or you've just set us up with city councillors for this area, two of them who have just arrived here at Luda's. Now they're both here. Thank you for being here.
More than welcome.
That is the CBC's Bartley Kivas talking more about the politics and the priorities of the city when it comes to the Arlington Bridge and how we got here. So stay tuned. More to come after 8 o'clock, as I mentioned, from Live at Luda's. We have Councillor Eady and Councillor Santos here to talk about what they're hearing from residents now that the bridge is closed and for their perspectives on how to move forward. So that's coming up. Right now, it's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, and let's go back to Pakanuga, who is let's go back to Heather Wells, who is back at 541 Portage Avenue, who's here with headlines.
Good morning. Well, some 80 people gathered in a vigil last night for the 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting on Langside. One family is grieving the loss of 2 sisters. Roberta Owen is the aunt of Crystal and Stephanie Beardy. She describes both women as mothers with happy spirits. Winnipeg police continue to guard that scene on Langside. They have yet to announce any arrests. And a giant billboard in downtown Winnipeg urges men to break their silence on sexual violence. It's the work of the Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Centre, part of their campaign 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. We'll hear more about it in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
And now, let's not go to Pat, but let's talk about what Pat usually is on about, which is the weather. It's my job at the top of the clock. It's -1 in Winnipeg. Our high today is 2. It's mainly sunny this morning. And we've got actually a nice sky outside Luda's looking out at Salter Avenue this morning. So if you're commuting, should be pretty good. Could be a little greasy. 788-3093 is where you can reach us should you need to. So as mentioned in Winnipeg, will be mainly sunny this morning, but later today I should mention a mix of sun and clouds And overnight, we're going to be cloudy with a chance of flurries in Winnipeg. So our conversation here continues from Luda's Live in the North End. We're talking Arlington Bridge. We've had lots of people weighing in with opinions. Take it down, remove the rail yards, change things for better access and green space. Wait a minute, leave it up, make it a pedestrian bridge. Everything from that to rebuild the whole thing with 3 lanes across and a lower slope. So what is possible and where do we go from here? As mentioned, we're going to hear what 2 city councillors who represent the area here in the North End, adjacent to where we're sitting this morning, we're going to get them to weigh in. That's after 8. Stay with us. You're on CBC.
On cue.
We're selling meat pies outside if y'all want any.
Hey y'all, this girl with stomach pains is selling meat pies.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. Danis Goulet is a Cree Métis filmmaker. She'll tell you about directing on the show Reservation Dogs and why showing love and joy is such an integral part of portraying Indigenous stories on screen.
Q, this morning at 10, 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Martin Barron led the Washington Post through some of the most contentious times in that paper's history, from billionaire Jeff Bezos buying it to President Trump attacking it. Martin Barron coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. Thousands of delegates are on their way to Dubai for the United Nations Climate Change Conference. COP28 starts tomorrow. Leaders from member countries will debate how best to reduce carbon emissions. But policy experts and environmentalists are also expressing concern over something else: the growing presence of fossil fuel lobbyists. Ben Shingler reports.
We're prepared to be part of the solution.
Kendall Dilling is heading to Dubai for COP28. He's the head of Pathways Alliance, which represents Canadian oil sands companies.
Globally, obviously, oil and gas, fossil fuels generally are a major part of global emissions. You can't tackle this problem without tackling that.
But environmentalists and policy experts are worried about the growing presence of fossil fuel companies at COP and say they have watered down agreements in the past. More than 600 lobbyists registered last year, up 25% from the year before. Canada had one of the largest delegations from the fossil fuel sector, second only to Russia. A high number of fossil fuel lobbyists are also expected at this year's event, which is being overseen by Sultan Al Jaber, the CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company.
There is a conflict of interest there.
Andréane Brazeau is a policy analyst with the environmental group Équiterre. She says a new regulation forcing oil and gas lobbyists to identify themselves will help, but questions whether they should be allowed at all.
We often compare it to having your house on fire and inviting the pyromaniac who set it on fire in the first place to have dinner there.
A spokesperson for Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says the participation of oil and gas companies is limited at COP and part of a much larger Canadian delegation. Ben Shingler, CBC News, Montreal.
One of the COP28 goals is to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030. The Canadian government says it supports that target. So does the United States, the European Union, and the United Arab Emirates. But supporting the target does not mean individual countries are committing to triple their own renewable energy. They're simply agreeing to support the international effort. Time is ticking on the temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. International leaders are pushing for another extension. But for now, this is the last day aid trucks will be safe to travel through Gaza, and the last day when the focus will be on releasing more people instead of fighting the war. As Briar Stewart tells us, the peace that is holding in Gaza does not extend to the West Bank.
Throughout the night, gunfire rang out in the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. The latest clash and an escalation of violence between the Israeli military and Palestinians. A few hours earlier in East Jerusalem, Naif Salema greeted his 14-year-old son Ahmed and thanked God for the deal between Hamas and Israel. The 14-year-old had been in jail since July, under arrest for throwing stones and causing serious bodily harm. When the war started on October 7th, we lost communication with our son, said his father. Israel has received a list today of at least 10 hostages who will be released in what could be the final day of the truce if it isn't extended. The pause in fighting has brought some relief to Gaza, where the UN says 1.3 million people are living in shelters. Officials say overcrowding, along with the lack of clean water, has led to a surge in respiratory infections and diarrhea.
But there is apprehension about what the future will bring. And
Thomas White is the director of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. He says beyond the humanitarian disaster, there's great worry about the truce ending and Israel launching a ground operation in the south.
There's nowhere for people to shelter, and it's going to become very, very difficult to even provide basic humanitarian aid in that.
U.S. officials are negotiating with their counterparts from Israel and Qatar about extending the break in fighting. But Israel has vowed it will eventually press on and will go after what it sees as Hamas targets wherever they may be. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In the House of Commons, debate begins today on the measures outlined in the fall economic statement, including the Digital Services Tax, or DST. It's a tax on big tech companies involved in things like e-commerce, social media, and online advertising. Parliamentary reporter Janice McGregor is here to explain why it's more controversial than you might expect. First off, Janice, when is this tax actually expected to come into effect?
Wouldn't we all like to know, Marcy? It's not unusual for a government to wait until budget legislation passes to finalize the date for a tax to kick in. But this tax in particular is going to be a huge play for the Trudeau government. It first threatened to do this several years ago, set a deadline of January 1st, but it also agreed under pressure to wait until international talks played out to see if countries could agree on a consistent way to treat digital revenues across their borders. Trouble is, months are stretching into years on that. Too many talks start to resemble stalling after a while. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland denied yesterday that not fixing a date in this bill means her deadline might be slipping.
Nothing is holding us up. We've been very clear about our intentions with Canadians. We've been very clear about our intentions with our partners around the world. And this legislation is the next step.
And it's a huge step because not only they can make a lot of revenue on this by taxing big tech companies that make more than $20 million a year in Canada. The Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated earlier this fall it could raise over $7 billion over 5 years. But it'll also move in solidarity with other G7 countries like France, the UK, that have already moved to clamp down on digital corporations that set up in low-tax jurisdictions, then make millions off selling their services into other countries.
So why is it taking so long?
Well, the danger here is not only how much digital companies don't like it, and they don't, but also how much in particular the U.S. administration doesn't like it. Voices in Congress, Biden's trade representative, have all made it clear that they're prepared to defend American tech companies against unfair targeting, and they would consider retaliation against Canada if this goes ahead. And that has Canada's business community worried because in fragile economic times, a new cross-border tariff war is not going to help.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Dutch bookstores are removing a book about the royal family from their shelves officially. It's because of a translation error. Unofficially, there are reports the Dutch version of the book names one of the royal family members who talked about the skin color of Harry and Meghan's first baby, or as Meghan told Oprah Winfrey,
concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
The book is called Endgame. Author Omid Scobie says he knows which two royals raised the issue, but he told the Dutch chat show RTL Boulevard he did not write it down.
For me, I edited and wrote the English version. There's never been a version that I've produced that has names in it.
He says laws in the United Kingdom prevent him from reporting who raised the concerns about the child's skin color. First, it was a video game, then a big hit for Hollywood and a huge economic boost for Alberta. The blockbuster American TV show The Last of Us was filmed in the Prairie Province, and according to Motion Picture Association of Canada, local businesses and film crews are seeing the benefits. The CBC's Tom Ross reports.
No one's going to find us.
The Last of Us generated a whopping $141 million for Alberta, making it the largest series ever filmed in Canada. It's according to a press release from the Motion Picture Association of Canada, citing data from advisory firm Oxford Economics. More than half of that money went to salaries of local cast, crew, and production personnel of the post-apocalyptic drama television series. The rest of it supported more than 1,000 Alberta businesses, including construction supplies, hotels, and catering. The show also earned 24 Emmy nominations. Damien Petty is the president of IATSE 212, which represents production crew in the province. He says they earned it.
And while you can't nominate all of the 1,400 people that worked on that project, they can take pride in contributing to those nominations, and hopefully they win some awards.
The series used Alberta as a backdrop for several locations, ranging from Boston to Colorado. And Alberta's film commissioner, Mark Ham, says the overall success is a sign this isn't a one-off.
And I think Alberta is being looked at as a destination of choice for projects of all sizes, including mega projects.
Ham says 2023 was a tougher year due to writer and actor strikes, but has high hopes for a big bounce back.
We're getting tons of phone calls, lots of interest, and I do think 2024 is going to be quite busy for the Alberta film sector.
And it may be busy for BC too. That's where Season 2 of The Last of Us is slated to be filmed. Tom Ross, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning. Live from Winnipeg's North End on a really quite a decent morning out there. It's cloudy. We are at Luda's Deli. We are at Aberdeen and Salter this morning. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is CBC. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app this morning. Well, why are we here? We are here because last week, Arlington Bridge shut down. And in February, the city's going to reassess. But right now, to go by there, as one of the city councilors for this area put it, it's sad. It's all, closed off. And that is sort of symbolic of this bridge and its storied history as we talk about connections north and south. So this is beyond a discussion about simply commuting. This half hour on the show, talk of the Arlington Bridge replacement is decades old. It has left people the north of the tracks here feeling more than neglected. We will talk to Councilor Ross Eady and Councilor Vivian Santos this half hour about Arlington and where we go from here. They are both with us live at Luda's. So stay tuned because we'll have that conversation. And if you still want to get questions and comments in on the Arlington Bridge, please keep them coming. We are listening to you. We are also hearing what you're saying on Facebook. If you want to call, 788-3205. So now let's go to first headlines. Heather Wells is in. We've obviously had some serious issues in the city this week developing, and she's here with updates and headlines.
Good morning. Well, some 80 people gathered at a vigil last night for the 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting on Langside. One family is grieving the loss of 2 sisters. Roberta Owen is the aunt of Crystal and Stephanie Beardy. She describes them as mothers with happy spirits. Winnipeg police are still guarding the scene on Langside. They have yet to announce any arrests. People in the Paw are suing their former doctor. They say she was recruited to work in their community for a decade, but left after 16 months. Court documents show Dr. Andrea Wilson agreed to work in the Paw until 2030 and signed a loan agreement worth $100,000. We'll hear more on that story in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in the weather and traffic situation with Pat Kanuga. Hello.
Good morning once again, Marcy. I'm going to get to weather and traffic in just a second. But first of all, a shout out to our listeners and viewers on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel.
Should we be waving maybe? Hello.
Yes.
Waving to YouTube counselors. Everyone's watching us.
I've been watching all morning here in the control room. Now, Marcy, we have our viewership, I should say, up 300% from a week ago, which is a massive increase. Yeah, so high of 37 this morning. Now, why is it so low? Well, because we just launched it. We're doing a soft launch. We know by January when we do the full launch, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people watching.
We're in practice phase.
Yes,
that's
right.
Hundreds of thousands. Well, there might be hundreds of thousands, actually. We're in practice phase right now.
That's right.
I think that bump week to week, though, is probably because you got a haircut. So
probably. Yeah, people are tuning in to see that the flow is gone now. That's right.
It was good. It was good for a while, but it was getting, as you said, a bit side mullet.
And it's a pain in the butt at 4 in the morning, too. to tame. So just check us out on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. We are posting videos and interviews there as well, and many elements from this morning's show will be there after the show, and as well we are live throughout the morning. So let's look at weather right now. It is -1. We've been there all morning here in the city of Winnipeg, and we're going to get today to a 2 on the plus side. And we're -1, I should say, right now in the city of Winnipeg. We're going to get to a +2. And we're going to see more sun. It did rise at 8:02 about 11 minutes ago, but we're going to see a little bit more of it. We're seeing some clouds north of the city, west of the city, and we expect to see more sun than clouds into the later morning parts. Not much wind either. Southwest 10 to 15 by this afternoon. And then a -6 tonight, a -3 tomorrow, the mix of sun and clouds. Friday, cloudy, -2. And then we'll see some clearing in the afternoon. For your weekend, a -2 and a -3 in the sunshine on the weekend. And even next week, we start off with a pair of -6s. So the average daytime temperature is a -6, so that's where we'll be early next week. Overnight low is -15, and the overnight lows right now are certainly warmer than that. That's what's happening in the city of Winnipeg. It is -1, up 3 degrees in Brandon the past hour, on the way to a +3. And Thompson, you're -15, you're down 1 in the past hour. You're going to hover around that -14, 15 with some light snow flurries this morning. In traffic, you know what you need this morning is windshield washer fluid, because the streets are a little bit wet. There is a little bit of mist, and here at the corner of Portage and Spence, they look a little bit greasy as well and wet, so you might get a little bit of spray from the vehicle in front of you, so do know that. But no reports of stalls, crashes, or any real major delays. If there is something, please call me at 788-3093.
All right, thanks very much, Pat Kanuga. Well, up next on CBC, as we've been mentioning, our whole show this morning has been dedicated to talking about the Arlington Bridge. We're now 1 week into the long-term closure of the bridge here in Winnipeg's North End, and neighbours and commuters are now having to look to McPhillips, Salter, or Main Street as the workarounds. My next two guests represent thousands of people who live in the wards that are mostly affected by the closure of the Arlington Bridge. To talk more about how it impacts residents and where the city steers the bridge debate next, I'm joined by Vivian Santos, the City Councilor for Point Douglas. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show today.
And just before I turn to Councillor Edie, you came in and said that was you talking about how sad it is to go by there, right?
Yes. I take that Logan Avenue to go into City Hall, and when I drive by it, it's the sad reality of seeing those barricades and fences up. It's very sad to see.
Councillor Ross Edie represents Minarski, also here with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Thanks for having me on.
And your first words when I saw you this morning were decay, decay, decay. Can you elaborate?
Yes. Well, it's been going on since I was elected, and it sounds like historically forever. There's really no divide between the North End and the rest of the city. The only divide are the people who are making decisions don't represent the area, so they don't care, and because they have other political reasons. But the decay. Everything's decaying in the North End. We're doing investments in downtown, very important. I don't disagree. But look, we're not investing in the Dufferin neighborhood, which is the neighborhood right by adjacent on my side of the Arlington Bridge.
Yeah, it's the first street you hit.
Yeah, and then we have William White decay. So the big problem is, and I've said it's just constant. And I said to the former CFO, Mr. Mike Ruda, who was the CAO as well, I just said, this is not right. We're not taking care of our decay and moving forward. Let's take care of our decay and as well do growth. We can do both, but the problem is we get elected officials who make these flat promises about how much you can spend we're not making the need. So they do is what happens is the North End gets the wrong end of the stick, right?
Now, you say that we can do both, but can we do both at this stage? I want to talk about how long Arlington has been, struggling. You were saying, Councillor Santos, that even the two of you, you knew this may be coming, but you didn't maybe know that it would be this fast. So what was it like for you when it's closed last week, deemed that we have to close it? What are you hearing from residents?
Well, residents are wondering, where are they going to go now? Now most of this community walks and cycles and takes the bus. Now they have to walk 10 to 15 20 minutes to either to Salter or to McPhillips, or maybe they're not even going to walk anymore. They're just going to stay home, right, and not go out. And so that's in our current climate with mental health, we need to be outside. We need to be getting to our community centers. We need to be getting to our local grocery store. And those things are not going to be happening if they're going to be staying home or forced to stay home because now they can't cross Arlington Bridge. So those are important conversations that are happening, and as Councillor Eadie had alluded to, we need those investments in our decay of our infrastructure. Are we going to be looking at what other alternatives and options are going to be made now for these communities who are directly affected? Are you now going to do more cycling infrastructure? Are you going to increase pedestrian access?
Could it be a moment could it be, just on that front before I turn back to Councillor Eadie, could this be a moment, an opportunity for a vision, because we have arrived at the door, of Arlington having maybe no feasible future, who knows? But
well, I mean, the vision has always been to build the new Arlington Bridge. That has been the vision for the last couple of years, right? And both Councillor Eadie and I have been advocating for a new bridge. Now that vision has come to a reality that maybe no bridge is being built, those are the conversations, us as leaders need to have with other stakeholders, because right now, it's really hard to see that vision when it's always been a new Arlington Bridge.
Yeah, fair enough. And of course, that conversation involves money and huge amounts of money, because then we're talking about rail yards. I want to ask you, Councillor Eadie, two things. One is about the rail yards, but the first one is actually building on what some listeners said. Viv Ketchum wrote in, she said, will this affect the closure, the response time for emergency personnel? And Judy Hershkovich wrote in and said, a lot of people use that route, over Arlington to get to the hospital. What's your sense of that, and is that a concern? What are you hearing from residents?
Absolutely, it is my concern, and as we heard from the history of the Arlington Bridge, it's never met the needs of the city for transit or for fire paramedic services, and it does have a really big effect. A lot of people actually who use Arlington go to work at the Health Sciences Center and all the different ancillary medical attention that you get there. And so actually one of the things that they don't want to study, and I hear this, from the firefighters, to get a fire truck across, because sometimes you got to get fire trucks from either side to fight a big fire, and as well as getting the ambulances there and getting people promptly. So what I'm intending on doing, and you can call it political or whatever you want, what I'm saying is that bridge is there, let's make it more functional for transit. But I'm going to get a study, because they're not willing to do it. I know somebody who has the expertise to do it. I'm going to hire them to see what is the delay in getting an ambulance over to the Health Sciences Center where the emergency is. Currently, Seven Oaks is still not an emergency room right now, and maybe in the future. But the point being is that it's the Health Sciences Center, so we need to get people there quickly. And every second, every minute counts when you have somebody in jeopardy like that.
Now, I know that Councillor Santos was just saying that right now the discussion has been, and the two of you have been advocating for a new bridge. However, let's talk about the rail yards for a moment here with the long history. This morning, they were saying that moving the rail yards, even that discussion's even been going on for decades and decades. There was money on the table in 1972 from the feds. There was like 50% of a funding agreement way back then that the city at the time turned down, I understand. Is it time to re-engage in that conversation? I mean, and look at the rail yards and moving them, and contribute to the $400 million to that $1 billion project, and instead of a new crossing. What are you hearing from residents? And is that maybe Councillor Santos first, and then back to Councillor Eadie?
Okay, I'm going to be quite frank on this issue. Removing the rail yards is going to take years and decades to have that conversation. You got to realize this is CP land that owns it. The provincial government and the federal government need to be at the table to have that discussion to move the rail lines and renegotiate all the lease agreements that are there with CP and all the ancillary and all the lines that go into that feed into Inkster Industrial and Omads Creek and even across. So just having those discussions is going to take a long time to renegotiate the lease. And then say you do get the rail lines, like hypothetically you get the rail lines out of there. What about the land that has that needs to be remediated? Who's going to spend the money to remediate the land? And even if you don't remediate the land, you're going to take about 50 to 75 years before you can even develop. So those conversations, I'm going to be quite honest, are not going to happen. I really do apologize to people who think that they're going to try to remove the rail lines. It's not going to happen.
Someone came in this morning. I was nodding when you were talking because someone came in for coffee, and they actually raised. They said, they had a gas station in their neighborhood be demolished, and then getting that site, back to green, back to safety. How long that took? So they were using that as their example. They said, how could that be possible? How long would that?
And
even
that
take?
is true for this location. It's going to take decades to remediate that area.
So how do you dream big for the people of the north part of Winnipeg, Councillor Edie, when we have those realistic things pressing at us? Arlington closed for now, immediate concerns about access, rail yards being challenging, and maybe, as you're saying, Councillor Santos, maybe something we shouldn't be thinking about. What do you hope the future will be for the Arlington Bridge, and where do you think we should be thinking now?
We're going to hear from the consultant who's going to tell us in February that in order to make it last for another 25 years, it's going to cost $200 million. So the reality is, why spend $200 million for 25 years with a bridge that's not functional? If we spend $400 million, that's probably about the inflation on the bridge from when they did the Class 3 study. So I say we need to replace it. Now, on the rail yards, I just have to say, I grew up in the North End. I hung out in Transcona. There's so many. The railways have provided so many good-paying jobs. Mm-hmm. I know lots of people who had good-paying jobs. They had a proper pension put away. They're doing really well. And there's people out there making really good money. So don't tell me how bad the railway is. The railway has been providing jobs. And if you do move the yards, everybody thinks that they're just going to move outside of Winnipeg in Manitoba. No, this is CPR Kansas City Rail, the third biggest railway in North America. Where do you think they're going to move the jobs to? So,
other things to consider.
Yeah. So
that we haven't talked about.
And to pay for stuff in the future, you need people getting paid good money so they can afford to pay the property taxes and so on, so that we could have the infrastructure that we have in the city.
What's the number one thing that you're hearing from residents, Councillor Edie?
From residents?
Yeah.
I got one call, the marginalization. Actually, the people I've talked, you've already talked to him this morning, Mr. Jones, and there's several people. I get lots of emails. One woman who lives on Jefferson, who used to live in the Boyd Park area, talked about, look, the North End again is getting the short end of the stick because Boyd Park Community Center was just let go, and the city didn't invest the money that was required to keep that community center going. This woman remembers that. And
so people are feeling like there's a north-south divide that is deepened in some way by what's happening with Arlington.
But the divide isn't the railway. The divide is, well, I'm going to say our elected leaders better get with it, because you know what? It's the whole city we have to be concerned about.
So before we let you go this morning, and we could talk for hours about this, we appreciate your time. I want to leave with it's a fun anecdote. When you were little, you did something on Arlington Bridge that we don't recommend, but it's not dangerous because it's close, so nobody can go try this. What happened to you, Ross Edie?
So I just learned to ride my two-wheeler when I was 6, but I was 7 years old the summer of 67, and this 12-year-old who was on a bigger bike, we went riding around, and we walked up the steep slope because I couldn't ride up, and then he said, I'm going to ride down, but you go first. So I went down towards Dufford Avenue, and I come flying down there. I was thinking, well, if I hit my brakes, I'm going to win. And I just went flying right through Dufford. Oh, man.
We're glad you're here to share that
And it's not the
story.
reason why he's blind.
but you can see the risks I take.
Yeah. Camaraderie between councillors who both represent the wards and constituencies that are right here in the North End and are both affected by the Arlington Bridge closure. Thank you both for being here. Obviously, we'll talk again as we see what happens through these months of closure and then where we go from here. Councillor Vivian Santos, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you here at Luda's.
Good seeing you.
And Ross Eady, thank you very much for being here as well.
You're welcome. Thanks, Marcy.
So Vivian Santos is a city councillor for Point Douglas. Ross Eady for Menarski. You've been writing to us. I know I've only gotten to some of your comments this morning and to some folks that were able to come down to Luda's. But please continue to have this conversation with us as we await to see what the future will be for this part of the city. So 788-3205 is that listener line, and you can always write to us as well on Facebook.
The Acme Corporation weaponized Wile E. Coyote. Butch puffed red apples in Pulp Fiction.
It's not a motorcycle, baby, it's a chopper.
And Homer downed a duck.
Beer.
Fake Hollywood brands on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
It's a wonderful time of year. A season worth celebrating. A season of giving. A season for kindness. Let's make the season kind for those in need. December 1st, CBC is devoting a day of programming in support of Harvest Manitoba. Music, stories, and giving. Make the season kind. Visit cbc.ca/BeKindMB for details.
Time right now is 8:29. On the nose, we are heading into news time here. I just want to mention when it comes to making the season kind, you just heard we're expecting, we're planning for rather a really special day on Friday. So we're coming close now, and we certainly hope you can make a date with your radio and with CBC Manitoba all day long. In fact, whether you're listening to radio or you're going to be watching us on YouTube or you're going to be watching the television news, Friday all day long is dedicated to raising money for Harvest Manitoba. And so that is for the work Harvest does, all the food banks it supports, all the different agencies all across Manitoba. We'll highlight some of that work, and the need is great this year. So we have deep need in our community. It's a moment to come together. Part of the joy of this day will also be the performers that will be joining us. So I can confirm that on Information Radio, we have a Meadows West School choir that's going to be with us in the first hour. I do love a choir at this time of year, and the students are pretty excited to be at CBC with us, so they'll be with us live. Aaron Prop and Larry Hua are confirmed as well for the 7 o'clock hour. They'll be joining us. Madeline Roger performing live on Radio Noon. And on Up to Speed so far, we know that Fontaine is going to be performing and Ben Darville from Son of Dave. So lots of great lineup of performances. So really looking forward to our day on Friday. Right now, it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is still -1 in Winnipeg. We're warming up to 2 again today. We start Wednesday with sunshine, then a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. Remembering the 5 victims of Sunday's mass shooting in Winnipeg. Some 80 people gathered at a vigil last night. A family is grieving the loss of 2 sisters among the others who were killed in the Langside rooming house. Crystal and Stephanie Beardy were sisters. Roberta Owen is an aunt of theirs. She was at a vigil with their mother. The band counselors from the family's home community of Lake St. Martin First Nation were also there. Owen says her niece's deaths have had huge impacts on the family, and the support from the community, she says, means a lot.
It helps a lot. It's not going to take any pain away, we have to grieve, we have to feel it. Everything still has to go on in our lives. It's just hard right now. It's very hard. It's a very huge loss.
Melanie Lesikal, who has family in the U.S. and Kenya, and Dylan Lavalley of Winnipeg also died on Sunday. A 5th person remains in hospital. Winnipeg police have yet to announce any arrests in the case. To the paw now, where people are suing their former doctor. They say she was recruited to work in their community for a decade, but left. Court documents show Dr. Andrea Wilson agreed to work in the PAW until 2030. She signed a loan agreement worth $100,000, but left 16 months later to work at a clinic in Vancouver. The PAW Community Development Corporation demanded repayment of that loan by December 31st, 2022. Cam Light at the Association of Manitoba Municipalities isn't commenting on this particular case, but says recruiting and retaining family doctors is an ongoing challenge for remote and rural communities.
Not only are they out financially for some sort of incentive that's been provided, but also the fact that they've lost this, this caregiver now.
Dr. Wilson could not be reached for comment. She has until early December to file a statement of defense. As Winnipeg ponders what to do with the now closed Arlington Bridge, city leaders are trying to avoid a repeat of what happened when the Waverley Underpass was built ahead of other major projects. The city's trying to take politics out of decisions over what gets built. Council's Public Works Chair, Janice Lukes, says the city had no choice but to build the Waverley Underpass. In 2015, she says the federal Conservatives made money available for Waverley because they wanted to re-elect former MP Joyce Bateman.
That was the price for Bateman, and we got the money, and we got the underpass. They didn't get Bateman, but I guess we got another underpass.
You can read more about the city's efforts to take politics out of funding decisions on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. A new billboard in downtown Winnipeg is asking men to answer a hard question about sexual violence. The ad on Donald near Stradbrook was created by the Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Centre. It is part of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Krista Anderson is the Social Enterprise and Innovation Manager at Clan Mothers. She hopes the campaign inspires more men to speak out against violence against women.
What if sexual violence destroyed your children, your mothers, your families? We wanted that to resonate with men too, to really stop and think about that. And then more men are needed. Where are the men speaking out on this issue?
Clan Mothers has put up similar billboards in Vancouver and Toronto. The Winnipeg sign will be up until December 10th. The Weather Network is out with its latest winter forecasts. It suggests Ontario, Quebec, and the prairies won't see much winter weather throughout December. However, colder conditions are expected as the season progresses. BC can expect to have drier than normal winter, and much of northern Canada will see milder temperatures. Only Atlantic Canada is in for what is considered to be a normal winter. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather Wells, for the morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Pat Kanuga, a quick last look at weather traffic here.
A couple of traffic tips to tell you about. This just in from the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center. Main and Assiniboine, there's a stalled bus. Southbound curb lane is blocked, so that's right around the bridges there. So Main and Assiniboine southbound curb lane is blocked from a transit bus. Also heard from Commuter Keith, Highway 2 and Highway 10 from Glenboro to Brandon is slightly frosty and a tad slippery in some corners. And that's just because of the temperature changes that we've been having here. In Brandon, it is -1 right now on the way to a +3. And in Winnipeg, we're -1 on the way today to a 2. And you might need some windshield washer fluid out there. Could be a little bit sloppy. I will mention Thompson. Good morning, Thompson. You're -15. You're going to stay around there with some flurries this morning. So a pretty warm day with a lot of +3s here, Marcy, as well in parts of southern Manitoba. So have a great, it's today? Wednesday? Yes.
It is Wednesday.
Have a great Wednesday, everyone.
Let's thank Tracy Conapata of Luda.
Hey, Tracy.
Hey. All right. Thank you to Tracy for having us here this morning. It's great to be back out here in community, and that is, it always prompts great conversation. I want to thank everyone who dropped by this morning as well. The place was packed, especially before people got off to head to work, but people came in and listened, even if you didn't hear them on the air. So just wonderful to be out in community here at Luda's Deli in the North End at Aberdeen at Salter, talking Arlington Bridge. As I mentioned, I know I didn't get to all your comments. Keep them coming. This conversation's not going anywhere as we go forward and see what some of the solutions can be for the future of Arlington, and of course also for this part of North Winnipeg. As we heard this morning, a lot of people feeling like it could use some more attention when it comes to infrastructure. I'm Marcy Markusa here with the team of the show. Thank you to the team that's been on site with us, Nellie Gonzalez, Warren Kay, and Corey Funk. Thank you to the team back at 541 Portage Ave, Pat Kanuga, and to also Abby Adeyemi there, and in our news department as well, Heather Wells in this morning. And Travis Peterson and all the people watching on YouTube this morning, Thank you for weighing in and for engaging with us as well at CBC Manitoba. Take care, be well, and that's it for our Live from Ludus. We'll talk to you tomorrow on CBC.